Chapter 1735. The Void Froze. A dreamy figure hovered in midair, surrounded by what looked like a nightmare. She had a graceful figure, but she gave off a sense of horror that rose from the bottom of one's heart. With a flick of her finger, a stream of black energy fell from the sky and turned a large area of District B into ruins. In the ruins, a disheveled figure shot out at an extremely fast speed. Although the relationship between Void City and the Soul Demons is not very good, the Soul Demon universe and Void City have always minded our own business. What you've done has provoked the relationship between us and Void City and triggered a war, the nightmarish woman said coldly. She was the third Duchess of District A of Void City, Duchess Nightmare. She was cultivating in seclusion when she received a kill order from the Queen of Curses. She was the third Duchess of District A of Void City, Duchess Nightmare. She had been cultivating in seclusion, but she received a kill order from the Queen of Curses. The other party was a soul demon. Duchess Nightmare's hatred for the soul demons was very thorough. Creatures like them were simply the vermin of the universe. Unfortunately, the soul demon universe was indeed very strong. Even Void City would not easily provoke a war between them. But this time, a soul demon had devoured an injured Marquis. This was tantamount to angering the Queen of Curses. Therefore, the Queen had specially ordered her to capture and kill this soul demon. There were very few soul demons banished from Void City, but because the Queen of Curses was an all-inclusive force, there were still some. Ezra covered his arm with one hand and sped away. His eyes were fierce. He kept running wildly through District B. Although he had not fully digested the Marquis, it was enough to restore his strength to the level of a chaotic saint. What he needed to do now was to escape from the pursuit of this Duke of Void City. This body's potential was almost completely stimulated by him, coupled with the entanglement of the sinful energy. Coupled with the entanglement of the power of sin, he did not immediately fall into the Duke's hands. Ezra knew very well that once he fell into the Duke's hands, he would die. The strength of a duke was enough to kill him. Not to mention that there was the Supreme Queen of Curses behind the duke. Rumble. He fled all the way. Duchess Nightmare was not in a hurry either. She floated behind Ezra like a cloud of black fog, playfully chasing her prey. A stream of energy suddenly descended and smashed into Ezra's body, causing the scales on his body to fall off in a pile. Ezra could not escape for Void City. Duchess Nightmare was in no hurry. Rumble. The raging black river of curses quickly approached them. The power of the curse roiled in the river, and the pitch-black river water assaulted his mind. Ezra had been forced into the river of curse in District B. The river of curses ran through the whole of Void City, and the area outside District D was surrounded by it. Some said that the river of curses was the source of Void City's power, while others said that it was the incarnation of the Queen of Curses. But everyone was clear. The River of Curses was a forbidden zone. Anyone who entered it would die without a doubt. Even dukes wouldn't dare to jump into the river without permission. Ezra had been forced to this point, and it was basically a dead end for him. Duchess Nightmare floated in the void. Her dreamy face would appear from time to time. Duchess Nightmare was very beautiful. She only had one face, and her hair was shrouded in a black fog. "Surrender," Duchess Nightmare said indifferently. "Surrender," Duchess Nightmare said indifferently. Suddenly, Ezra bellowed, turned around, and jumped into the river of curses. In a flash, he fell into the river. A splash rang out, and water splashed everywhere. "You're courting death." Duchess Nightmare shook her head. Suddenly, Duchess Nightmare froze. She found that Ezra, who had fallen into the river of curses, was not immediately corroded into bones. Instead, one of his arms emitted a strange energy that wrapped around Ezra's body, preventing him from being corroded. Swoosh! Ezra swam rapidly in the river of curses like a yacht, instantly rushing out. He followed the river of curses all the way out of Void City. How presumptuous! Duchess Nightmare narrowed her eyes, and a murderous aura surged in her. The next moment, She kicked the ground with the tip of her foot and turned into a clump of black fog. She flew past District B, entered District C, then flew past District D and rushed out of Void City. When a huge river of curses reached District D, it turned into a mighty waterfall and poured into the starry sky. A deafening sound rang out. Duchess Nightmare hovered in midair. Her eyes narrowed. Suddenly, she saw a crocodile-like figure leaping out of the waterfall. "Found you." Duchess Nightmare smiled coldly. She approached Ezra, who had rushed out of the waterfall of curses. Ezra's body had been corroded and was drenched in blood. He looked miserable, even though his arm was protecting him. Although his arm was protecting him, it was said that the river of curses contained the power of the Queen of Curses. The fact that he could resist the power was enough to show that he was extraordinary. Stepping in midair, Ezra wagged his crocodile tail and tried to escape. However, he was halfway there when a cold feeling approached him. "Damn it, this haunting woman!" Ezra growled, turned into a beam of black light, and sped through the void. Some of the bone ships that approached him were smashed to pieces by his arm. Explosions rang out incessantly. He was refining the Marquis's power as he fled. Soon, however, he felt despair. Pitch black, ice-cold chains coiled around him. In the next moment, all of Ezra's paths of retreat and forward were sealed. A terrible murderous aura approached him. The mighty chaotic energy pressed down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. Duchess were the top experts of Void City. They were existences second only to the Queen of Curses. How could he escape from such existences? Ezra despaired. Duchess Nightmare was indifferent. She raised her hand. A vast stream of energy gathered and surged over her finger. Then, she flicked her finger. The power of Nightmare shot out, trying to pierce Ezra's soul and kill him. The energy was only the size of a finger, but the power it released was enough to destroy heaven and earth. "Oh!" Ezra hissed. Suddenly, Duchess Nightmare's pupils constricted. The void was torn apart. A monstrous power of sin poured out of it. Ezra's back was torn open, leaving a huge crack behind him. Behind the crack, a claw covered in scales stretched out. Bam! It collided with Duchess Nightmare's attack. At this moment, the stars in the universe began to tremble. Countless stars exploded, and many bone ships turned to powder. However, the arm was unscathed. A great soul, Overlord's soul demon. Duchess Nightmare took a deep breath. Boom! The arm grabbed Ezra and pulled him into the rift. Behind the rift was another universe, the Soul Demon universe. Do you really think Void City is a place where you soul demons can do whatever you want? Duchess Nightmare's eyes turned scarlet. The next moment, she let out a shrill cry. She raised both hands. Two huge dark rings swirled in her palms as she threw them toward the rift. She wanted to kill Ezra. However, the palm in the rift gently flicked out a finger. A finger shadow that seemed to be able to pierce through the universe collided with the two rings. "Please send my regards to the Queen of Curses. This little fellow is related to the awakening of the soul god, so I'm sorry to disturb you." A faint, gentle voice came from the rift. Ezra was pulled into the rift by the arm. Slowly, the rift healed. "When His Excellency's soul god wakes up, I'll come back to Void City to send my regards in person." His voice faded away. With a hum, the rift healed completely. Duchess Nightmare's face was grave. Looking at Ezra and the arm that had disappeared, she took a deep breath. She felt a great pressure from the Great Soul Overlord just now. He must be a top existence among the 7 great sins. He was most likely the strongest Great Soul Overlord. Looks like things are very serious. I can't believe a Great Soul Overlord brought Ezra into Void City. Isn't he afraid of the Queen's wrath? Duchess Nightmare murmured. The next moment, her figure flickered and she disappeared from where she was. She had to report this matter to the Queen of Curses. Bufong stepped into District A with Xiao Bai, Little Hu, and the others. District A of Void City. It was the most prosperous and noblest district in the whole of Void City. The population in District A was much smaller than that of District C and District B. However, The atmosphere in the whole district was extremely grim. Bufong had already made up his mind. He was going to open a restaurant in District A. Didn't the Queen of Curses dislike chefs? In that case, he was going to open a restaurant right under her nose. Bufong raised his chin. Xiaobai followed behind Bufong. The clanging of metal rang out. It was different from District B. Bufong did not seem to attract anyone's attention when he entered District A. Everyone was minding their own business, as if this was a very prosperous and beautiful city. The street was not very spacious, and hawkers were selling things on both sides of the street. Bufong leaned over to take a look, and his eyes narrowed instantly. All of the items on sale here were extraordinary. Star cores, the claws of ancient beasts, and so on. Those who could use these things were basically existences at the level of saints of the Great Path. Although District A was one level higher than District B, it was impossible for only high-level people to live in District A. Therefore, the experts in District A were not much weaker than those in District B. There were also god emperors among the nobles, and god kings among the commoners. Perhaps the biggest difference was that their top fighting prowess was a little weaker. After all, District A was ruled by dukes. Of course, there were 3 dukes' mansions in District A. The Queen of Curses Palace was also in District A. In the deepest part of District A, the most magnificent building was the Queen of Curses Palace. Standing on the street, Bufong looked up at the dome of the palace. He could feel a terrible aura brewing. It was as if a supreme being was watching him. Just as Bufong was in a daze, suddenly, Bufong felt an aura approaching him. Bufong paused for a moment, then turned his head to look. He turned his head and found that a golden-haired girl had come to his side. "Bufong? Chef?" the girl said, glancing at Bufong. Bufong nodded. He was a little curious as to who this girl was. "Come with me. District A is now full of cursed goddess souls people," she said. After saying that, she turned around and went into a dark alley. Bufong sensed the girl's strength. She was not strong, only a god emperor. Bufong followed her with Xiao Bai, Little Hu, and the others. As soon as they entered the alley, it was as if they had entered a maze. The houses were piled up together, forming an extremely narrow alley. The girl moved very fast. Although it was troublesome for Bufong to walk, it was not difficult. Little Hu and Xiaopi were even more relaxed. As for Xiao Bai, as he walked, he left deep ditches in the wall. He was a little chubby. He struggled to keep up with Bufong. Finally, after the alley, there was a main road. The girl squatted at the end of the alley, poked her head out, looked around, and then dashed out. Like a slippery loach, she sped toward the main road. "Follow me." The girl's voice drifted over. Bufong raised his brows slightly. He followed the girl. With a creak, the girl pushed the door open, pulled Bufong and Xiao Bai into the room, and slammed the door shut. Rumble. The moment the door was closed, the sound of horses galloping echoed out of the street. A group of steel horsemen surged forward. The girl leaned against the door, panted, and looked at Bufong. "Come with me. Her Excellency Nethery is waiting for you," she said. After saying that, she walked into the depths of the room. Bufong frowned. "This situation, you're hiding like a thief." It seemed that Nethery's days in District A weren't easy. Chapter 1736. The girl glanced at him. "Is this the chef Her Excellency Nethery is looking for? Why does he look a little paralyzed? Come with me. Her Excellency is waiting for you," the girl said after thinking for a moment. Bufong nodded and did not think too much about it. Cursed Goddess Soul was very powerful, and it was said that almost all the nobles in District A supported her. So, it's not surprising that Yu's living space is so small. As the girl walked forward, she glanced curiously at Xiao Bai, then at Xiaopi, who was lying on Xiao Bai's head, and Little Hu, who was perched on his shoulder. This combination is really strange. Her Excellency Nethery said that the arrival of this group could give her hope and help her a lot. But was that really the case? She always felt that this combination was a little unreliable. A paralyzed face, a Little Hu, a bubbling spitting shrimp, and an iron puppet with a belly bigger than its head. As they walked through the hut, they found that there was another world inside. The girl led Bufong and the others to an array. It was a teleportation array. It was set up in a very secret place, and they needed to open 3 checkpoints to activate it. As they stood in the array, a buzzing sound rang out. Bufong and the others disappeared, and when they reappeared, they were in a cold palace. "We're here. This is Her Excellency Nethery's cursed goddess palace. Every cursed goddess has her own palace," the girl said to Bufong. The girl said to Bufong as if she was explaining to him. "Palace? In the depths of District A?" Bufong asked, glancing at the girl. "That's right. Both the cursed goddesses and the Queen of Curses live in the palaces in the depths of District A. This is a side palace, and the Queen's palace is outside. But don't think about going to her palace. Except for the cursed goddesses and the dukes, no one else is qualified to enter the Queen's palace, and the Queen will not see you. Especially since you're a chef." The girl glanced at Bufong. "What's wrong with a chef? Does chef eat your rice?" Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth and said nothing. Walking along the palace, the style of the palace was a bit similar to the architectural style of Central Europe. The ceiling was hemispherical, and there were strange patterns drawn on it, adding a lot of artistic atmosphere. The palace was cold and cheerless. As he walked, the only sound he could hear was his own footsteps. Following the girl, they came to a huge door. The girl knocked on the door, then spread out her hands and pressed them against the wall. With a creak, the door opened. "Lord Netherworld, I brought him back." The girl's tone seemed to be a little joyful. Bufong stepped into the room with his hands clasped behind his back. He saw Nethery, who was sitting in the ordinary-looking room. He was wearing a long black dress, and her long black hair was spread out. She looked at Bufong without any emotion. "You came." He looked at Bufong and said. His tone was a little relaxed. When the girl heard this, she immediately felt that it was inconceivable. Cursed Goddess Nethery was actually so happy to see a chef. "You don't look very well." Bufong glanced at you, then glanced around the room. It felt a little like being imprisoned. Duchess Yunlan was called away by the Queen of Curses. So Her Excellency Nethery is in a very dangerous situation now. Her Excellency Soul has been looking for her. If she is found, she will die, the girl said. Xiao AI closed the door. You looked at the girl and said. The girl pouted as if she was a little reluctant, as if she felt wronged and dissatisfied that you trusted this chef more than her. She was Her Excellency Nethery's maid. Bufong pulled out a chair and sat down as if he was very familiar with the room. What's the situation now? Bufong asked. Soul has started to make a move. She has the support of most of the powers in Void City and has a great advantage. She has begun to hunt me and the cursed goddesses from the primitive universe. Duchess Yunlan has also been sent away by Soul. I'm alone and helpless now. Yu's expression did not change in the slightest, as if she was in a deep crisis. Bufong nodded and stroked his chin. It's okay. I'm your support. I told you that I can fight against an army, and it's still the same now, Bufong said. Bufong raised a hand and patted Xiaobai's belly. Xiaobai can also fight against an army. You paused and glanced at Xiaobai. Xiaobai seemed embarrassed by the compliment. He raised his huge palm and scratched his head. His purple mechanical eyes kept flashing. Xiao AI rolled her eyes as she listened to the conversation from a distance. She did not know about Bufong's strength or what had happened in District B. However, she could sense that Bufong's aura was only that of a Saint of the Great Path. Well, a Saint of the Great Path is nothing compared to Her Excellency's soul. I can't believe this chef dares to brag that he can fight against an army. As for that iron puppet, she would not comment on it. You purse her lips. Bufong, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat? You asked. Her eyes lit up in an instant. When it came to food, she was delighted. Little Hu, who was listless on Xiaobai's shoulder, perked up as well. She was very interested in food. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched slightly. He did not say anything. With a thought, the black turtle constellation walk and the dragon bone kitchen knife flew out. He was about to start cooking. Of course, before that, Bufong had something to tell you. Well, I'm going to open a restaurant in District A. Do you have any suggestions? Bufong asked. You paused. Xiao AI also rolled her eyes in the distance. This chef is crazy, isn't he? opening a restaurant in Void City, and it's in District A, right under the nose of the Queen of Curses. Isn't he afraid that the Queen of Curses will crush him with one finger? Opening a restaurant? It should be possible. I'm now a cursed goddess, the future heir of Void City. It should be easy for me to open a restaurant in District A. Right, Xiao AI? You looked at the girl in the distance, who was rolling her eyes. Your Excellency Nethery, we do have a restaurant, but you can't go out now. Besides, opening a restaurant is so blatant that you will easily become Her Excellency's soul's target. Duchess Yunlan has told you to wait for her return, Xiao AI said. It's okay. With Bufang here, I can do it, you said, pursing her lips. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Since the matter of the restaurant was settled, it was time to start cooking. He shook his hand. A mass of white flour spread out. It was the flour produced by Nyohan-san after hybridization in the Heaven and Earth farmland. The flour was fused with the law of life, so the noodles made were enough to make people feel like they were walking on clouds. Bufang kneaded and pulled the dough. His movements were incomparably skillful and natural. You narrowed her eyes and watched with joy as Bufang cooked. As for Xiao AI, she was already dazzled by Bufang's dazzling skills. Are all chefs so showy? Bufang spread his fingers, each with a noodle between them. The slender strands shook in his hands like thousands of strands of black hair, gleaming as they swayed. Gurgle! The spring of life was boiling. Bufang cut the shrimp rolls made of blood lobster meat into slices and put them into the wok to boil. Then he put the noodles in his hands into the wok. The noodles writhed like black hair. The broth was so clear that the bottom could be seen. As the noodles boiled, white foam surged. A strong aroma of noodles surged. You took a deep breath. She was intoxicated. Xiao AI swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It seemed fragrant. Bufang took out a few blue and white porcelain bowls. He fished out the noodles. The slender noodles were placed in the bowls, and steam rose. Bufang poured the broth into the bowls, placed the shrimp rolls on them, and placed the immortal vegetables that continued to emit immortal energy. He poured out the water in the wok and reheated it. Bufang held a round spirit beast egg in his hand. His thumb and index finger moved, and he directly opened the spirit beast egg. There was a cracking sound. The entire egg fell down. It fell into the wok. Bufang grabbed the black turtle constellation wok and shook it. However, the poached egg in the wok didn't move at all. The oil splashed on it, making the color of the egg even warmer. The rich egg fragrance was extremely alluring. The Chilean transmigration ladle scooped. The poached egg fell into the bowl. It covered half of the bowl, together with the shrimp rolls leaning against the corner of the bowl and the crystal-clear immortal vegetables. A simple bowl of noodles was completed. Bufang's cooking speed was very fast. He didn't keep you and the others waiting for too long. You took the noodles and began to eat as if she had been hungry for a long time. Slurp! The soft and slender noodles went into Yu's mouth through her red lips. The tip of the noodles seemed to spurt with broth. Xiao AI looked at you in disbelief. Her Excellency Nethery was not afraid of delicious food at all. One had to know that the Queen of Curses hated delicious food very much. Your Excellency, Xiao AI stammered. Bufang held a bowl of noodles and ate with relish. Although it was just a simple bowl of noodles, the simpler the food, the more it showed the chef's skill. Xiao AI, aren't you eating? You glanced at Xiao AI, feeling a little strange. Bufang also gave Xiao AI a bowl of noodles. Why didn't she eat it? No, Her Majesty won't allow it. Xiao AI hurriedly waved her hand, a look of horror on her face. Delicious food was heresy. It was forbidden in Void City. She would never do such a taboo thing, even if she was beaten to death. You gave Xiao AI a strange look. Are you stupid not to eat delicious food? Picking up the poached egg, you bit down on her red lips. With a crunch, the soft white was bitten off, and the yolk in the middle was broken. The orange-yellow yolk immediately flowed out. The medium-rare yolk, still in the form of mucus, flowed out of her mouth and tasted like butter. It made Yu's breathing quicken. Xiao AI's face turned red as she watched. The most instinctive reaction of the human body made her a little conflicted. Her Excellency Nethery seems to be eating. It seems delicious. She tugged at the front of her clothes, hesitating. She raised her head. There seemed to be tears in her big eyes, but she kept her face up and did not let them fall. I don't dare to eat. You're not eating? If you're not eating, I'll help you eat. Bu Fong had finished his bowl of noodles. He was very hungry after fighting all the way from District C to District A. Little Hu was slurping the noodles. When he heard Bu Fong's words, his little eyes were fixed on Xiao Ai's bowl of steaming noodles. Bu Fong glanced at Xiao Ai, twitched the corner of his mouth, and reached out a hand to grab the bowl of noodles. Delicious food is a kind of enjoyment. If even enjoying delicious food is a taboo, then it is imperative to break this taboo, Bu Fong said. As Xiao Ai watched Bu Fong's hand approach the bowl of noodles, her mind was filled with the steaming noodles and the orange-yellow yolk. Finally, she could not stand it anymore. She snatched the noodles from Bu Fong's hand. Hugging the noodles, he squatted at the corner of the wall and started to gobble down the food. Tears streamed down her face as she ate. It's delicious. Xiao Ai, I've broken the taboo. Your Majesty, please don't blame me. This noodles, it's so fragrant. Bu Fong leaned back in his chair and looked at Xiao Ai, who was swallowing the noodles in one gulp. The corner of his mouth twitched. The charm of delicious food was hard to resist once one had tasted it. When Xiao Ai finished the noodles, her face was flushed and she looked embarrassed. She was the one who said she would not eat it, but she was also the one who enjoyed it. Are you full? Then take me to the store. Bu Fong looked at Xiao Ai and said. Xiao Ai froze. She glanced at you and saw you nodding seriously. Your Excellency Nethery, this store will never open. As soon as we show our faces, Her Excellency Soul's men will come for us immediately. The store will be smashed. Your Excellency Nethery's life will be in danger. Why don't we wait for Duchess Yunlong to come back? Xiao Ai said, her tone pleading. She was really thinking about you. However, Nethery just glanced at it. She shook her head firmly. It's okay. Let's go open the store now. Xiao Ai had no choice. She could only take Bu Fong and you out of the palace. The teleportation array rumbled. They came directly to a spacious street. Bu Fong, you, Xiao Bai, and the others appeared in the store on the street. This is the property that belongs to your Excellency Nethery, Xiao Ai said hesitantly. Bu Fong looked around the store and nodded with satisfaction. With a thought, he contacted the system. System, renovate the store, Bu Fong said. As soon as he finished speaking, thousands of rays of light flowed through the whole store, and everything began to change rapidly. Xiao Ai opened her mouth wide as she watched everything in the store change rapidly. Eventually, it turned into a restaurant. Looking at the familiar style and everything, Nethery's heart couldn't help but soften. His originally tensed body relaxed. The familiar restaurant style gave her a sense of belonging. The path understanding tree was swaying. Little Hu, who was on Xiao Bai's shoulder, jumped out excitedly and shuttled back and forth on the path understanding tree. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. He stepped into the kitchen and stood at the door, sticking to his duty. As for Xiaopi, he lay under the path understanding tree, blowing bubbles. Bu Fong was very satisfied with all this, and he stroked his chin. He stroked his chin and glanced at the hesitant Xiao Ai. Xiao Ai, open the door for business. Chapter 1737. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bu Fong said in high spirits, Oh, what? Why do you want to open the door? Xiao Ai seemed to be taken aback. She did not know what Bu Fong was calling her for. For a moment, the atmosphere froze. You pursed her lips, then rose to her feet and walked toward the door, intending to push it open. Xiao Ai came to her senses and hurried forward. Your Excellency Nethery, put it down. Let me do it, she said hurriedly and pushed the door open. With a creak, the door was pushed open in an instant. It was as if a golden light had burst out of the restaurant, attracting everyone's attention. In district, many passers-by were shocked by this scene. Many people were bewildered. As people who lived in District A, they were very familiar with everything in District A. Naturally, they knew what this restaurant used to be. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back. He looked out the door. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes. You walked back indifferently. Xiao AI rubbed her hands, looking a little bewildered. What should I do? If I open a restaurant in District A, I will definitely become the target of public criticism. Her Excellency Nethery will definitely be exposed, and the expert soul will kill her. It's over. I've really fallen for this chef's nonsense. How could he open a restaurant in District A? Bufong was very calm. He had seen all kinds of big scenes. Well, now that I have a restaurant, I need a name. Bufong touched his chin, lost in thought. What should I call it? Suddenly, Bufong's eyes lit up, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He had thought of a perfect name. Let's call it Cooking God Little Restaurant. Bufong said. You paused. Little Hu, lying under the path understanding tree, rolled his eyes. Xiao AI's body stiffened. What kind of name is this? Is this name meant to speed up the restaurant's destruction? The Queen of Curses hates chefs the most in Void City, but you still opened Cooking God Little Restaurant? You must be tired of living. Bufong was very satisfied with the name. Buzz, the system seemed to be thinking. After a long time, store name confirmed, the system said. His words fell. Outside the restaurant, a stone tablet floated in the air. Boom! The steel seemed to grow out of the ground of Void City, causing it to crumble and crack. In the next moment, a stone tablet appeared, and 4 large words appeared on it. Cooking God Little Store don't underestimate these 4 simple words. Every single word was filled with a unique charm. Just one look at it would cause one's mind to sink into oblivion. If one were to comprehend it deeply, one would be able to sense its sharpness. Cooking God Little Restaurant. One had to admit that this name was really weird. A group of people had already gathered outside the restaurant. These people were all nobles of District A. As nobles of District A, what had they not seen? They were very familiar with everything in District A. Now, an unfamiliar restaurant had appeared. They were naturally very excited and curious. This is actually a restaurant? Which idiot dares to open a restaurant here? Doesn't this guy know that the Queen of Curses hates chefs? The nobles' faces were filled with mockery as they laughed. They believed that this restaurant would not be open for long. What was the use of a restaurant? What was the use of dishes? Just to satisfy one's desire for good food? Even if one's dishes could enhance one's cultivation base a little, could they compare to divine pills? One must know that this street was incomparably bustling. Opposite the restaurant was a medicine refinery workshop. How could a restaurant compare to the divine elixirs produced there? Not to mention the Queen's prejudice against restaurants. Just the fact that the restaurant was located opposite the pharmacy was an absolutely unwise move. Many people had gathered in front of the restaurant. Of course, these people were just here to watch the show. Some people recognized it as Nethery's property. She was the last cursed goddess in the world. Many of them had no hope for you, and now they were even more disappointed. How could a cursed goddess like her be qualified to inherit the Queen of Curses' will and become the master and ruler of Void City by hanging out with a chef? It would not be long before the restaurant would be destroyed. Cursed Goddess Nethery would also be killed by the people sent by Soul. Xiao AI felt uncomfortable all over. After all, anyone would feel uncomfortable being watched like this. Your Excellency Nethery, let's go. Are we going to stay here and be laughed at? You are the future lord of Void City. Xiao AI said. You glanced at her. She looked calm. In the restaurant, she felt more secure than ever. It's okay. Don't worry. You comforted her. When Xiao AI saw her cursed goddess acting like a salted fish, she felt a little disappointed. She turned to Bufong. Call me Owner Bu. Bufong glanced at her and said before she could say anything. Xiao AI froze. Damn it. Almost burst into tears. You could be the waiter for the time being. Otherwise, you'll have to do it. Bufong said. After that, he turned and walked toward the kitchen. Xiao AI could not let you be the waiter, so she raised a hand and stopped you from getting up. Your Excellency Nethery, sit down and let me do it, she said through clenched teeth. She wished she could bite Bufong until he bled. This chef has gone too far. She was, after all, a noble of District A. How could she be ordered around like this? Don't worry, you'll get paid. The delicious dishes are your wages. Buffon's voice drifted out of the restaurant. Xiao AI rolled her eyes. Your restaurant is in District A, and you want to open for business? Are you kidding me? She shook her head. She was not optimistic about it at all. Without customers, there was no point in the restaurant's existence. As a waiter, there was no need for her to move. However, just as Xiao AI finished speaking, a figure suddenly appeared. The sound of footsteps rang out outside the restaurant. That gave her pause. She turned to look. A figure walked in from outside the restaurant. Marquis Langu. How could she not know Marquis Langu, one of the 3 marquises of District B? Marquis Langu was famous for his coquettishness. He was also a famous old drummer. Of course, the most important thing was that his sissy appearance made it difficult for him to go out. He was a chimpanzee and a sissy, and he was Marquis Langu. Marquis Langu toyed with the rattle drum in his hand as he walked into the restaurant, strutting his cat-like steps. There was an inexplicable bitterness in his eyes as he pinched his fingers together. Your Excellency Marquis, please have a seat. Xiao AI brought Marquis Langu to a seat. At some point, a piece of white cloth appeared in her hand. With a flick, she wiped the chair clean. Marquis Langu cleared his throat, straightened his neck, pinched his fingers together, and sat down. Xiao AI was dumbfounded. What's wrong with me? Why did I get used to the role of a waiter so quickly? What's going on with that uncontrollable feeling just now? Just a moment ago, she did not think there would be any customers. For a moment, she fell silent. Marquis Langu was very famous in Void City. The moment he stepped into the restaurant, his eyes lit up. The moment he stepped into the restaurant, the crowd of onlookers broke into an uproar. Marquis Langu? Is he crazy? Why is he going to the restaurant? He's crazy. Stepping into the restaurant is tantamount to standing on the opposite side of the queen. What's the point of going to a shabby restaurant? I'm afraid this Marquis Langu has shaken himself silly. The nobles had their own opinions. However, Marquis Langu did not care. He held his head high, looking as elegant as a noblewoman. At this moment, Buffon walked out of the kitchen. When Marquis Langu saw Buffon, the muscles on his face twitched. Why are you here? Buffon gave Marquis Langu a puzzled look. This fellow was his opponent not long ago. So why was he here? Can't I come? You're so annoying. Marquis Langu pointed a finger at Buffon and said plaintively. Xiao AI's hair stood on end. Could there be a story behind this gesture? Let me tell you something. Marchioness Modi is dead. Marquis Langu was not in a hurry to order. Oh. Buffon paused. Marchioness Modi was the one whose fleshly body was destroyed by Xiao Bai. Didn't Xiao Bai release her soul? As long as the soul of a chaotic saint still exists, it is impossible for her to die. She was devoured by soul demons. Those damn beasts. I've advised Her Majesty not to let these disgusting beasts into Void City. Otherwise, such a tragedy would not have happened. Marquis Langu shook his head and said with some discomfort, My little Modi, if I feel like crying. Marquis Langu bit his lip. That's good. You'll feel better after eating this dish, Buffon said. Buffon could not figure out why Marquis Langu was here. I'm no longer on cursed goddess Soul's side. Little Modi died tragically at the hands of soul demons, so I went to Soul and asked her to go to the soul demon universe to catch the murderer. But Marquis Langu covered his mouth with one hand, his eyes wet. Clearly, the result was very frustrating. So, I'm very disappointed, so I've decided to seek refuge with Your Excellency Nethery. I'm going to fight for little Mot, Marquis Langu said. Although Buffon was the culprit who destroyed Marchioness Modi's body, he was not the only one. However, it was also Buffon who released Marchioness Modi's soul. For some reason, Marquis Langu felt that Buffon was very humane. Well, Buffon did not know what to say. He glanced at Marquis Langu, whose eyes were red and covered his mouth. I thought this gorilla is a cold beast. I didn't expect him to be so loyal. But it's a pity that Martianist Modi was tricked by a soul demon. Bufong narrowed his eyes. For some reason, Bufong thought of the soul demon's arm. Could it be that guy's doing? Bufong shook his head and did not think too much. He turned to Marquis Langu. This is a restaurant. Since you're here, order some food. What do you want to eat? I can make it here. Bufong said. Marquis Langu held the rattle drum between his fingers. Delicacies? I hate delicacies. Her Majesty said that none of the chefs are good. After that, Marquis Langu gave Bufong a sad look. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. You can give it a try. Women always say one thing, but mean another. They say they don't want it, but in fact, they like it very much. Maybe Her Majesty really likes delicacies? Bufong said. Marquis Langu paused. That sounds reasonable. Xiao Ai was also stunned. How could this stiff-faced chef come up with such a theory? Well, let me think about it. Marquis Langu rolled his eyes. Then, he gently shook the rattle drum in his hand, producing a crisp sound. Chef Bu, I want to eat monkey brains. Do you have any? Marquis Langu said, the corners of his mouth curling upward. Monkey brains? Bufong paused. He looked at Marquis Langu with a strange expression. Isn't he a gorilla? Why does he have such a heavy taste? I want to eat monkey brains, but I don't want you to kill monkeys for their brains. Otherwise, I won't let you off. So, can you satisfy me? Marquis Langu leaned back in his chair and blinked. Xiao Ai was dumbfounded, and Nethery pursed her lips. Marquis Langu is really coquettish. This request is simply too much. Can Honorbu do it? How can I get monkey brains if I don't kill monkeys? Xiao Ai could not figure out no matter how hard she thought. Bufong raised his brows slightly. Looking at the contented Marquis Langu, he twitched the corner of his mouth. Monkey brains, right? Wait a moment. Chapter 1738. Bufong did not expect that Marquis Langu would want to eat a monkey's brain. However, he asked not to kill the monkey and take its brain. Is this a problem? Bufong narrowed his eyes. As Marquis Langu was the first customer of Cooking God Little Store, Bufong would reluctantly satisfy his request. Bufong gave Marquis Langu a deep look, who was sitting proudly in a chair. The Marquis was very confident. Perhaps he felt a sense of accomplishment by making things difficult for Bufong. After all, Marquis Langu was defeated by Bufong when he was possessed by Qilin. Bufong shrugged, not taking it seriously. Wait a moment, Bufong said. After that, he turned and went into the kitchen under everyone's surprised gazes. Can Bufong really make a monkey's brain? Xiao Ai felt that Marquis Langu was deliberately making things difficult for Bufong. After all, Marquis Langu's true form was a gorilla, so he must be disgusted by the monkey's brain. But why would he ask Bufong to make a monkey's brain? There must be a reason. If he did not use the monkey's brain, what else could he use? Could he use something else to carve it? Impossible. That kind of pieced-together thing would not be able to perfectly express the taste of the monkey's brain. After all, as a marquis, he might not have eaten many delicacies, but he could still distinguish the basic taste. His strength was there for all to see. Xiao Ai's eyes rolled as she watched Bufong step into the kitchen. Your Excellency Nethery, do you think Honorbu can succeed? It's such a difficult problem. Xiao Ai leaned over to you and asked curiously. Difficult? You glanced at her and shook her head. It may not be difficult for Bufong. When it comes to cooking, there is no problem that can stump him. Nethery smiled. That smile was enough to topple a city. It was beautiful. Xiao Ai was stunned. Your Excellency Nethery is so confident in Honorbu. Marquis Langu could not sit still in his chair. He stood up and walked back and forth in the restaurant, sizing it up. He was quite interested in this restaurant that dared to open in District A. This kind of interest had obviously surpassed his interest in gourmet food. In his eyes, there was no concept of delicacies. The Path Understanding tree was a tree that grew up with Bufong. Now, it had already become a supreme Tao tree. The will of the Tao on it was extremely dense. Little Hu, who was lying under the Path Understanding tree, suddenly raised his head and narrowed his eyes when he saw Marquis Langu. Yo, what a cute little hoolie. You must be the little hoolie that can spit out meatballs from your mouth. How interesting. Everything in the universe is really omnipotent. Even a fox that can spit out meatballs can appear. Marquis Langu felt his maternal love overflowing. He reached out to pat Little Who's head. However, it was rejected by Little Who. Marquis Langu grabbed a rattle drum and shook it in front of Little Who. Then, he hit the drum with 2 drumsticks. Little Who rolled his eyes and wagged his tail. Xiaopi came out of the kitchen, lay down beside Little Who, and spat bubbles as he stared at Marquis Langu with his compound eyes. Marquis Langu seemed to be interested. He picked up the rattle drum and beat it rhythmically. In the kitchen, Bu Fong rolled up his sleeves. This was his first show in Void City, so he had to keep his spirits up. The Queen of Curses hated chefs, but she did not stop him from opening a restaurant in Void City. Clearly, she still had some leeway. In that case, the more Bu Fong wanted to open the restaurant, the more he wanted it. Monkey brain. Since he could not make a real monkey brain, he could only make a fake one. Bu Fong rubbed his chin and thought for a while. He seemed to be thinking about how to cook a dish. In fact, he already had a rough idea in his mind. His mind went into the heaven and earth farmland. Bu Fong asked Niu Han-san for some beans. These were not ordinary beans. They were specially developed and cultivated by Niu Han-san, and each of them was a priceless treasure. A single bean could bring a person back to life and regenerate flesh and bones. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were divine herbs. To Bu Fong, these beans could only be described with one word: delicious. Bu Fong asked Niu Han-san for some beans, but Niu Han-san refused at first. After all, it was not easy to cultivate this kind of beans. There were too many procedures and channels. In the end, under Bu Fong's intense gaze, he handed over 10 beans. It made him shiver with pain. White smoke billowed from his nostrils, and he almost went on strike. Of course, after Bu Fong promised to cook him a delicious dish, Niu Han-san happily took out the beans. Bu Fong grabbed the beans from bag. The bean was amber in color, sparkling and translucent, and extremely resplendent. There seemed to be a majestic energy flowing in them. There was a stone mill in the farmland. It was made by Bu Fong using the nucleus of a star. Simply put, it was a magic treasure, but it was not as good as the god of cooking said. Bu Fong put the beans into the stone mill. After a series of procedures, he made the tofu. 10 beans were made into a big piece of tofu. The square-shaped beans were very soft and tender. When touched, they seemed to bounce. Bu Fong had never eaten monkey brains before. Of course, he did not like to eat this kind of food. However, he believed that Marquis Langu had not eaten it either. Therefore, Bu Fong made it according to his understanding. He held the crystal-clear tofu that was as white as jade in his palm and crushed it. The tofu turned into powder and fell into a blue and white porcelain bowl. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. Bu Fong took out a soft blood lobster meat. He cut the small blood lobster meat into thin shreds and poured it into a blue and white porcelain bowl. He poured it into a blue and white porcelain bowl, along with all kinds of strange seasonings. He took out the spirit beast egg, discarded the yolk, and poured the egg white into the bowl. He began to stir. The power of the law, the chaotic energy, they all poured into the blue and white porcelain bowl, causing the energy in the bowl to mix continuously. If people knew that Bu Fong used the chaotic energy in this way, they would definitely lament that it was a waste of a heavenly treasure. Nevertheless, the result was good. Bu Fong scooped a spoonful of the ingredients in the bowl and put them into his mouth. He smacked his lips and raised his eyebrows slightly. The taste was a little worse. It was warm with a little tenderness, but it lacked a fishy smell. Buzz water splashed. He grabbed a hairy crab from the farmland. Of course, this was just an ordinary hairy crab. However, after staying in the farmland for so long, it naturally became extraordinary. Bu Fong took out the crab roe and poured it into the bowl. After stirring, he mixed it into the ingredients. The guidance of the law and the fusion of the chaotic energy, it made the crab roe completely blend into the ingredients. He picked up the ingredients one more time and gently sniffed. He could smell a faint fishy smell the corners of Bu Fang's mouth rose. He was very satisfied. He grabbed the blue and white porcelain bowl. With a flick of his finger, the blue and white porcelain bowl began to spin in his hand. It kept spinning. Eventually, Bu Fang put it upside down on the stove. A round, pinkish-white ingredient was piled on top of it. It was the gathering of a variety of ingredients. And this was just the first step. Buzz knife light began to flash in Bu Fang's hand. The dragon bone kitchen knife buzzed. Bu Fang seemed to hear the roar of a dragon. He held the dragon bone kitchen knife. Bu Fang's mental force instantly flowed out. Buzz, the knife light flashed, cutting that ingredient. He was very careful, afraid of making a little mistake. This was a test of Bu Fang's knife skills. Of course, there was no problem with Bu Fang's knife skills. If it was just to carve the shape of a brain, of course, it would be easy. However, with Bu Fang's knife skills, it was obviously a waste to carve such a shape. Bu Fang wasn't satisfied with simplicity. Thus, under the control of his mental force, that ingredient formed the shape of a brain. Every line on it, even every neuron, was carved by Bu Fang clearly. This knife skill alone was enough to amaze countless people. It was like the skill of the creator, which was really frightening. However, no one saw this scene, except for Xiao Bai, whose mechanical eyes twinkled at the door. The kitchen knife swept across. Bu Fang held the knife with one finger, making it twirl in his hand. Then, he put it away. It's done. Next is to cook. Bu Fang looked at the monkey brain, which looked so real. A gleam of excitement flashed in his eyes. Every neuron, even every curve, was exactly the same as the monkey brain. Of course, it was fake. It was just a mixture of tofu, crab roe, and other ingredients. He took out the black turtle constellation wok, placing it on the heaven stove. Swish! Oil was poured in. Instantly, the oil splashed. Bu Fang grabbed the black turtle constellation wok with one hand and the Chilean transmigration ladle with the other. He spun the black turtle constellation wok, making the oil in the wok cover the entire surface. He poured the purple garlic, scale-tail scallion, and other ingredients into the wok. After stir-frying, he removed the impurities, leaving only the oil. The Chilean transmigration ladle shook. Holding the fake monkey brain, he poured it into the wok. Bu Fang's eyes brightened. He began to shake the wok. The monkey brain kept jumping in the wok. However, because of the control of his strength, the monkey brain didn't shatter because of the violent shaking. On the contrary, the oil completely covered the monkey's brain, and as the monkey's brain pulsated, the taste seeped into it. This move was even more amazing. The control of his strength had reached the level of lifting something heavy as if it were light. After all, it wasn't easy to control his strength with a wok between them. Swish! He smashed the black turtle constellation wok on the white tiger heaven stove. The Chilean transmigration ladle swayed, grabbing the fake monkey brain. Thud! 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 The monkey brain was jumping. It looked like a real monkey brain. His eyes narrowed. Bu Fang's hand shook. 2 giant pearls flew out. They were pearls from the endless sea. They weren't considered treasures here, but after being nurtured in the river of life for a long time, they had divine energy. The pearls flew in the sky. Bu Fang's eyes were sharp. In just a blink of an eye, the dragon bone kitchen knife slashed tens of thousands of times. The pearls turned into powder, slowly falling from the sky. Then it turned into a big pearl and wrapped the monkey's brain up. Eventually, the entire monkey brain disappeared. Only the pearl was left, hovering in Bu Fang's hand. He placed the pearl on a blue and white porcelain plate. On both sides of the plate, immortal vegetables were stacked with crystal water droplets. The dish was done. Rumble. Bu Fang seemed to feel an invisible will. However, when it got close to Void City, it disappeared. He narrowed his eyes. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched slightly. Then, he walked out of the kitchen with the dish. In the restaurant, everyone was waiting. You didn't seem worried at all. She looked very relaxed. Xiao Ai rubbed her hands, looking as if she had nothing to live for. Marquis Langu was teasing Little Hu with a rattle, but Little Hu kept rolling his eyes at him. Xiaopi was spitting bubbles. He seemed to be having a good time. Outside the door, the sound of hurried footsteps rang out. Marquis Lang-gu narrowed his eyes. Alas, opening a restaurant in District A is like becoming a living target. This will bring harm to Her Excellency Nethery, Marquis Lang-gu said. Outside the restaurant, waves of majestic auras were rapidly approaching. Before long, the restaurant was completely surrounded by people. The ground seemed to be shaking. Xiao Ai's face turned pale. It's over. Her Excellency Soul's pursuers are here. The restaurant is finished, and Her Excellency Nethery is in trouble. Marquis Lang-gu rose to his feet, his face growing serious. Outside the restaurant, a troop of cavalrymen clad in black armor approached slowly. They were all mounted on mighty divine beasts, holding long spears and exuding a mighty aura. It's Her Excellency Soul's army, the cavalry of death. Many nobles outside the door exclaimed, looking like they were waiting for a good show. Once the cavalry of death appeared, everything would be flattened. This restaurant, including the chef, would be reduced to a thing of the past. Ting-a-ling. Just as the cavalry of death arrived outside the restaurant, a crisp bell rang. The curtain of the kitchen door was pulled open. Bufong rolled up his sleeves and walked slowly out of the kitchen. The pearl monkey brain you wanted is ready. Chapter 1739. A monkey brain with a pearl. Bufong's voice was not loud, but it made everyone in the restaurant look up. Many nobles outside the restaurant were watching curiously. Soul's cavalry of death was already outside the restaurant, but the chef was still so calm and collected. That surprised many people. Bufong held a blue and white porcelain bowl in his hand. The bowl was flat, and on top of it was a huge, round pearl. The immortal vegetables, which were stained with liquid, were dotted with the pearl, which looked quite beautiful. Is this a monkey brain? Can this thing be eaten? Isn't it just a ball? It has no taste at all. Is Bufong going to let me eat it raw? Marquis Lang-gu looked puzzled. Little chef, the monkey brain I'm talking about is not allowed to come from a monkey. Marquis Lang-gu pinched his middle finger and pointed at Bufong from a distance. Bufong raised his brows slightly. Are you worried that I'm bluffing? Bufong said, glancing at Marquis Lang-gu. Good. If I'm satisfied with your monkey brain, I'll help you deal with the cavalry of death outside, Marquis Lang-gu said in high spirits. Although the cavalry of death was fierce, since Marquis Lang-gu had decided to stand on Nethery's side, he naturally had to show some sincerity. Fighting against the cavalry of death was his military pledge. Okay. The corners of Bufong's mouth lifted slightly. It seemed there was food to eat. Little Hu, who was lying listlessly under the path understanding tree, suddenly perked up. He turned into a baiguang and sped toward Bufong's shoulder, rubbing it with his little paws. Don't worry, this is for the guest. Bufong rubbed Little Hu's head, which made Little Hu feel a little pity. You also looked curiously at the huge pearl. This is just a pearl. How is it related to a monkey brain? From the looks of it, it didn't seem to be a related delicacy. Bufong, on the other hand, smiled mysteriously. He was very satisfied with the dish, and it was definitely a dish that had attracted the attention of the law of the universe. However, it might be because the supreme existence in Void City had stopped the punishment from the law of the universe. Marquis Lang-gu sat calmly on a chair. Outside, the cavalry of death looked at each other. They were led by two chaotic saints, but they were just ordinary chaotic saints. In a one-on-one fight, they were only at the level of the person in charge of the fighting pit. However, the two chaotic saints were twins, and when they joined forces, they could unleash strength no weaker than a marquis. They were also quite famous in District A. Moreover, he was a very powerful subordinate of Soul. Cursed Goddess Soul was very popular in Void City. Countless nobles had high hopes for her and stood by her side. The two brothers were no exception. The Lien brothers were riding on the back of the two-headed phoenix, and behind them was the powerful cavalry of death. However, he seemed to be curious about the scene in the restaurant. The two brothers raised their hands and clenched their fists, signaling the cavalry of death behind them to stand at attention. I like to see what the hell this restaurant is doing. Why is that slut Marquis Langu in this restaurant? The two brothers said almost in unison. Then they nodded. The nobles all sucked in their breaths and looked into the restaurant. Marquis Langu sat in a chair and took out a white cloth, which he had condensed with his power. At their level, it was not unusual for them to condense and transform objects at will. He stuffed the white cloth into the collar of his shirt around his neck, then sat down calmly, looking forward to the food Bufang had prepared for him. He had never tasted food in Void City. He was not like Countess Xiaqiu, who was a cursed goddess a long time ago. She had wandered in other universes and tasted food. Marquis Langu, on the other hand, was a native of Void City. He was a noble of Void City. He had never tasted the food cooked by a chef before, so he was a little curious, even though it was taboo to the queen. I'm ready. Marquis Langu stuffed the rattle at his waist and blinked at Bufang. How do I eat this thing? Do I bite it? Marquis Langu asked. Bite it. Try it. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The outermost layer was pearl powder. Although it was edible, it was not the main delicacy. He looked at Marquis Langu, who was calm and unruffled, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Bufang could not help but feel sad. He could not believe that no one in Void City, which claimed to be the strongest city in the universe, had ever tasted food. It was the tragedy of life not to have tasted food. Now, Bufang was here, as Bufang, who wanted to become the god of cooking who stood at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world. Bufang felt that he had an obligation to help these people redefine the meaning of food. Buzz, the Chilean transmigration ladle appeared in Bufang's hand. The ladle spun rapidly in his hand like a small whirlpool. Marquis Langu was dazzled by what he saw. Suddenly, Bufang grabbed the ladle. His grip on the ladle was steady. Then he smashed it down. With a crack, it hit the top of the huge pearl. The pearl was like a round egg, and there seemed to be something good inside it. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the bottom of the Chilean transmigration ladle knocked on the pearl. The huge pearl, which Bufang had recreated, broke with a crack. Buzz, a gust of wind blew over. The pearl began to break slowly, and the broken parts turned into powder and drifted away. Ting-a-ling. The bell in the kitchen rang, and the curtains swayed gently. A gentle breeze blew through the restaurant. Then the white powder drifted out little by little, looking like a beautiful galaxy in the dark, starry sky. Marquis Langu was stunned. He covered his mouth with both hands, and his eyes shone with worry. Bufang snapped his fingers. The light in the restaurant dimmed. In the darkness, the pearl glowed, drifting with the powder. It was as beautiful as a fairyland. Marquis Langu's cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were watery. This beautiful scene made his young girl's heart thump wildly. Is this what food looks like? It's really beautiful. Marquis Langu looked shy. This little chef is so romantic. Outside, many nobles saw the scene as well, and many of them opened their mouths wide. This dreamlike scene caused them to be rather shocked. Many people also wanted to see what food looked like. This time, it was really beyond their expectations. Suddenly, many people's expressions changed. Thump. It was a sound that sounded like the beating of a heart. The sound made many people's hearts skip a beat. Many people raised their heads and looked incredulously at the restaurant. They turned to look at the pearl. Halfway through, the pearl stopped dispersing. The powder drifted in the air, revealing the scene inside. Marquis Langu narrowed his eyes and looked inside, intoxicated. He wondered what kind of delicacy would come out of such a beautiful scene. Marquis Langu looked. The next moment, his intoxicated expression froze, and he looked confused. Underneath the pearl shell was a beating brain. The brain was so lifelike that it looked like a real monkey's brain. The patterns, nerves, lines, and concave holes were all the same. Damn it, this stinky chef really has a bad taste. My maiden's heart was instantly smashed into pieces. Marquis Langu gritted his teeth. The muscles on his face twitched, and his heart was filled with anger. He gave Bufang a hateful look. Are you really cooking with a monkey's brain? He said angrily. Her originally coquettish words turned into a rough roar like that of a wild beast halfway through her sentence. Clearly, he was a little angry. It was as if he was about to transform. A terrible aura soared out of him, and the pearl in front of him seemed to be about to explode under his aura. However, Bufong gently waved his hand. Then it covered the dish. I told you, this is not a real monkey's brain. Don't worry, you could try it first. Bufong said. The nobles outside were already very curious. In their eyes, they could see the scene clearly. Inside, the huge pearl was a brain. The brain was still beating, and the nerves on it seemed to be beating. It looked so lifelike that it looked like it was real. He really has a brain. Is this chef lying through his teeth? How is he not a brain? Bufong seemed to notice the other's gazes. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. This dish is called Pearl Monkey's Brain. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong looked at Marquis Langu, whose aura was gradually calming down. The ingredients used for this dish are a bit complicated. It uses a type of bean. This bean was cultivated by my personal breeders, and it's a divine bean. One bean can grant immortality, and the other can regenerate flesh and bones from the dead. The bean was ground into a pulp and made into tofu. The main ingredient of this dish is tofu. The tofu is not fake, but to achieve the effect of passing off the fake as the real thing, tofu alone is not enough. So, I also used many other ingredients, including the essence of blood lobster meat, carefully selected by me, and the essence of crab roe at the best stage. After stirring, the taste was perfect. Of course, these are only the main ingredients. With my invincible knife skills, I carved this fake monkey brain. As for the fact that it beats like a real brain, it's because I splashed it with oil. You won't understand what the oil splashing method is even if I tell you. All you need to know is that this method is very powerful. Bufong said lightly. Many people were dumbfounded when they heard this. They felt that Bufong was talking nonsense. Xiao AI was dumbstruck. She glanced at Nethery and found that the latter was smiling, as if she did not doubt the chef at all. How is that possible? Tofu can be made into monkey brain. Marquis Langu was dumbfounded. He even believed it. Try it. Bufong looked at Marquis Langu and said lightly. Outside the door, many nobles narrowed their eyes. No matter how much Bufong said, he would know after tasting it. However, Marquis Langu did not know what the monkey brain tasted like. For a moment, many people were watching with rapt attention. No matter how it tasted, once Marquis Langu showed a look of disdain, the so-called delicacy was nothing but a fart. Just as the Queen of Curses had said, delicacies were all heresy. Everyone's breathing quickened. They turned to Marquis Langu. Then, shall I try it? Marquis Langu said as he straightened the white cloth around his neck. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. He took out a blue and white porcelain spoon and handed it to Marquis Langu. The pearl monkey brain can also be called monkey tofu pudding. Try it. Bufong made a gesture to invite the Marquis to try it. The real wonder of this dish begins the moment you put the spoon into it. Marquis Langu took a deep breath. For some reason, he felt a little excited. He was not this excited even when he was fighting a chaotic saint. His hand holding the spoon seemed to be trembling. He glanced at Bufong. Inside and outside the restaurant, many people were watching. At the front of the cavalry of death, the two brothers exchanged a glance. They were no longer in a hurry. All the nobles held their breaths. Marquis Langu narrowed his eyes. Looking at the dish that looked like a brain, he felt a strange feeling in his heart. Is it really not a monkey brain? The blue and white porcelain spoon fell. With a splash, it went into the monkey brain. That soft monkey brain was like a piece of jelly, cracking open in an instant. Boom! The next moment, Marquis Langu froze. As soon as the monkey brain was bitten, white steam gushed out of the brain. It sprayed all over his face. This caused him to involuntarily let out a burst of panic screams. After 2 moans, he was completely intoxicated. Marquis Langu was completely mesmerized by the rich aroma that gushed out of the white steam. At this moment, the true face of the monkey brain was completely revealed. Chapter 1740. Sizzle. Marquis Langue screamed. White steam sprayed on his face, and a rich fragrance rolled out from the steam, enveloping his head, causing him to be immersed in a state that he could not extricate himself from. Ah! Marquis Langue screamed. The people around him were dumbfounded. What's going on? Xiao Ai's little nose twitched involuntarily. As the steam gushed out, the aroma gradually enveloped the whole restaurant and even drifted outside. The aroma was so strong that it seemed to seep into one's skin, making one shiver. Xiao Ai turned to look at Bufang. The latter clasped his hands behind his back, and the corners of his mouth curved upward slightly. He was exuding confidence from the inside out. For some reason, she found the chef somewhat handsome. Yu, on the other hand, pursed her lips. She had trusted Bufang from the beginning. Since the hidden dragon continent, Bufang had cooked many delicacies, and she had never seen Bufang suffer a loss. The steam dissipated. It was the steam that had been lurking in the monkey's brain. At this moment, it had completely dissipated. Then, the plain monkey brain began to change. Brilliant lights and vibrant colors flowed around the monkey's brain, and a strange power of law lingered around it. It was as dazzling as a neon rainbow and as blurry as the aurora. Beautiful, too beautiful. Marquis Langue was deeply intoxicated by it. He had never tasted delicacies before, and because of the Queen of Curses, he was prejudiced against them. But this time, to his surprise, he felt that the delicacies were not bad. He scooped out a spoon. The white monkey brain bounced on the blue and white porcelain spoon. It glowed brilliantly like a piece of jade. At this moment, the patterns on it were filled with a blurry color. Then, I'll start, Marquis Langue said. Bufang nodded. Outside, the noble swallowed hard. He's really going to eat it? Delicacies are taboo. Marquis Langue is really courageous. Xiao Ai looked at Marquis Langue and thought of the first time she ate a bowl of noodles cooked by Bufang. At that time, her heart was filled with rejection. But just one mouthful, she had betrayed her faith in the queen. This delicacy was poisonous. Marquis Langue gave Bufang a deep look and raised his thumb and middle finger. Then he scooped up the food on the porcelain spoon and stuffed it into his mouth, soft and tender. Extremely soft and tender. As soon as his tongue made contact with the monkey's brain, he felt a softness that made it difficult for him to free himself. The taste that spread on the tip of his tongue suddenly spread throughout his body. It was like an electric shock, like the feeling of first love. This is a monkey brain? No. Marquis Langue covered his face with his hands, his eyes glazed over. He felt everything in front of him change. There was no end in sight, and it was like a vast ocean. Towering waves surged and roiled, and the rumbling was deafening. As for him, he grabbed the rattle drum and stepped on a small boat, howling in the tumbling waves. The waves drenched his clothes, revealing his graceful figure, but he didn't care at all. At that moment, he let go of himself. He was himself, a different kind of morning glory. Dong! Dong! Marquis Langue's eyes were glazed over. He took out the rattle drum and kept shaking it. The drumsticks hit the drum, and the water splashed on the surface of the drum rhythmically. The feeling of happiness and intoxication. It made him feel as if he had experienced an unprecedented climax. Dong! The drum beat was deafening. Marquis Langue howled and looked up at the sky. His throat grew bigger and bigger. Everything in front of him turned white. In reality, Marquis Langue's face was flushed. He raised his head, and tears trickled down the corners of his eyes. This is a delicacy. Marquis Langue's voice was choked with sobs. Everyone present was dumbfounded. What's wrong with him? He looks as if he has been violated. His face was as sorrowful as water. Marquis Langue looked at Bufang with a sad look in his eyes. The monkey's brain did not taste like a brain. It tasted soft and tender in the mouth. Although there was a fishy smell, it was not strong or even obvious. In fact, the fishy smell was the finishing touch, making the delicacy seem as if it had a soul, like a real monkey's brain. In fact, it was not a monkey's brain, but it made one think it was. It was not something that could be created out of thin air. It was a creation that went deep into the soul. Delicacy. So this is a delicacy. Marquis Langu suddenly felt a little confused. Why did the Queen of Curses forbid them from tasting such a delicacy that could cleanse one's soul? He finally understood what it felt like today. It was the feeling of being moved. How is it? Is it delicious? Bufong looked at Marquis Langu and twitched the corner of his mouth. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite the Marquis. A purple clay teapot appeared in his hand. He poured himself a cup of warm green tea and took a sip. It's delicious. Marquis Langu gave Bufong a sad look. He could not help but clamp his legs together and sigh. A delicacy like this will make people abandon their faith. He scooped up another spoonful. In his eyes, the bouncing monkey's brain was like a peerless beauty. When he bit into it, he could taste the right amount of saltiness and the soft texture. Marquis Langu was somewhat immersed in the feeling. Now, you know what I mean, Bufong said. He raised his hand and pointed at the death cavalry, who were waiting for him outside the door. The nobles woke up from their reverie. Their eyes were filled with horror. Heresy. This is heresy. This is a monster that deceives your souls. The two brothers of the cavalry of death shouted at the same time. Their eyes were filled with a solemn look. The moment they smelled the aroma, they almost could not control themselves. Fortunately, their loyalty to the Queen saved them. Cavalry of Death, charge! Flatten this restaurant that creates monsters. We must uphold the Queen's faith. Everything is heresy. The commanders of the Cavalry of Death were two chaotic saints. They were Pai Dong and Pai Shi. Their eyes were bloodshot as they let out hoarse roars. Just now, their unwavering faith seemed to have been shaken. To them, this was a deafening wake-up call. The eyes of the Cavalry of Death flashed. The next moment, a rumble rang out. They began to charge and trample. In District A of Void City, the Pai Brothers' Cavalry of Death became famous throughout the universe. Rumble. The roar of beasts that filled the whole district seemed to be deafening. The next moment, the ground shook. The charge of the Cavalry of Death began. Pai Dong and Pai Shi's eyes were filled with anger. Marquis Langu swallowed a spoonful of monkey's brain. A relaxed smile came over his face. A tear trickled down the corner of his eye and slid down his gentle face. Owner Bu, save this delicacy for me. I'll be right back, Marquis Langu said. The next moment, he rose to his feet. Holding the rattle drum tightly in his hand, he walked out of the restaurant. So what if they were the Cavalry of Death? The real protection was the feeling he felt when the delicacy entered his mouth just now. So what if he had to become the enemy of the entire starry sky in order to protect it? In order to protect his momentary heartbeat, he had to make the entire starry sky his enemy. So what? From today onwards, delicacies would be his religion. Xiao Ai's jaw dropped as she stared at Marquis Langu in disbelief. At that moment, she felt the power from Marquis Langu. Was this still the Marquis Langu that she knew? District A, Fairy Palace. Cursed Goddess Soul was clad in a white robe that spread out like a peacock's tail all over the ground. She sat on the ground and stared at a ball in front of her with a serious expression. She bathed and changed her clothes for this thing. She had brought it back from the Soul Demon universe, and it contained the essence. The power of the 7 great sins accumulated together. Pride, greed, gluttony. The power of the 7 soul overlords was gathered in this little ball. Dong, dong, dong. There was a light knock on the door. Cursed Goddess Soul's eyes shifted. Zhang Xian thought. The black ball instantly turned into a stream of light and entered her palm. It was her secret, given to her by the man who saved her from danger in the Soul Demon universe. It was her faith. Come in. Cursed Goddess Soul straightened her clothes and said. The door was pushed open. A delicate figure that seemed like it would be blown away by a gust of wind walked in. It was Duchess Tianlian. Soul, did you send the Cavalry of Death to kill you? Duchess Tianlian asked. This woman was actually very beautiful. Not the kind of breathtaking beauty, but the kind that made people feel sorry for her. The fight for the successor has reached a critical moment. Can I kill her? Soul rose to her feet. Dragging the long tail of her robe behind her, she walked to Duchess Tienlian's side, put her arms around her waist, and gently leaned her head against her chest. It's not that I can't. I just want you to show me some mercy. After all, you're all cursed goddesses, treasures that have rarely stood out among the many universes and survived. You are the treasures of Void City, Duchess Tienlian said. Leaning against Duchess Tienlian's chest, Soul sighed softly. There was a deep look in her eyes, and her face was cold. It's precisely because it's not easy to survive that I have to kill. The cursed goddesses are competitors. If I don't kill them, they will kill me one day. I have experienced too many betrayals and killings in the Soul Demon universe. Duchess Tienlian sighed again. Flowers wither and fly all over the sky, and no one will pity them. Of the 3 flowers competing for beauty, one will eventually wither. Duchess Tienlian patted Soul's thin body and closed her eyes, her long eyelashes fluttering. I'm here, and I will always support you. Don't be afraid. Rumble. The moment the cavalry of death moved, all the nobles in District A knew that. The competition between the cursed goddesses had reached the stage of a showdown. Many nobles retreated. It was not easy for them to take a side in this kind of competition. Many nobles chose to remain neutral and wait and see for the time being. There were 3 cursed goddesses. In addition to Nethery, who was weak, there was another cursed goddess from the primitive universe. Although Nethery was not as powerful as cursed goddess Soul, she had the backing of the entire primitive universe. It was hard to say what the result would be. Soul, on the other hand, had taken the initiative to kill another cursed goddess, which was an unjust move. After all, the cursed goddesses shared the same origin. Rumble. The city shook as the cavalry of death trampled on the ground. The next moment, a group of black soldiers charged toward the restaurant, as if they were going to crush it in a flash. Inside the restaurant, Marquis Lang Gu walked out. Looking at the cavalry, his eyes narrowed. Dong, dong, dong. He took out a rattle drum and gently shook it. The corners of his mouth curved upward. Facing so many soldiers, he did not retreat a single step. I'll treat this battle as a greeting gift to Nethery. With such a chef who can create miracles by her side, perhaps, Nethery is not completely helpless. There might still be some suspense about the position of the candidate. Pai Dong and Pai Shi narrowed their eyes. They looked at Marquis Lang Gu. La's phoenix feathers fluttered. The next moment, Pai Dong and Pai Shi knocked their bows and shot arrows. The bow was a pitch-black dragonbone bow. The arrow was a cold black phoenix feather arrow. Pai Dong grabbed the bow, and Pai Shi shot the arrow. The 2 brothers had a tacit understanding, and the arrow whistled through the air. The sound of an arrow whistled through the whole District A. The next moment, the arrow lowered its head and shot toward Marquis Lang Gu. Behind the black feathered arrows was the majestic cavalry of death. Rumble. The black feathered arrow shot toward Marquis Lang Gu. With a thump, it pierced the rattle drum in Marquis Lang Gu's hand and galloped into the restaurant, heading straight for you, who was standing quietly beside Buffon. As for Marquis Lang Gu, he was instantly engulfed by the cavalry of death. He was engulfed by the cavalry of death. He was trampled by countless savage beasts. Chapter 1741. A whistling sound rang out. Buffon sat indifferently on a chair, fiddling with the purple clay teapot in his hand. In the distance, a rattle drum was pierced by a black feathered arrow. It flew over with terrifying energy, and its target was Nethery. The void seemed to tremble under the impact of the arrow, and it seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The energy ripples continued to spread and spread in all directions. It was as if the void was collapsing, twisting, and distorting. Xiao AI screamed. This was the attack of a chaotic saint-level expert. The joint attack of Pai Dong and Pai Shi was comparable to that of a marquis. That was why Xiao AI screamed. Your Excellency Nethery, run. She screamed, trying to warn you. Under the arrow, she didn't even dare to move. All she could do was scream. She could even imagine the miserable look on Yu's face after being pierced by the arrow. Her heart was filled with fear. Yu's pupils constricted. A chill was spreading from the soles of her feet, making her feel cold to the bone. It was a black feathered arrow. It was made from the feathers of a two-headed black phoenix. It was extremely powerful, and it also contained terrible curse and corrosive power. Marquis Langu's rattle drum was no ordinary drum, but it was pierced by the arrow. Ghostly green cursed snakes slithered out of Yu's body. She was trying to block the arrow. Just when Xiao AI was despairing and Yu was on guard, a black walk appeared in front of Nethery, shielding her from the attack. A crisp clink rang out. The black-feathered arrow hit the black turtle constellation walk. The arrow, which could pierce through a rattle drum, kept spinning on the walk, but it couldn't move any further. Holding the walk in one hand, Bu Fong took a sip of tea from the teapot. Then he exerted force on his Taotai arm boom. In the next instant, the black-feathered arrow was fiercely thrown out by Bu Fong. A thud rang out. The arrow flew backward, heading toward a group of cavalrymen in the distance. Roar! A furious roar resounded. A peerless great demon had awakened. Marquis Langu had transformed into a great demon. His body suddenly became very huge, like a terrifying giant beast. The figure that was originally covered by the armored cavalry suddenly stood up at this moment. He spread his arms wide. The steel cavalry charged at his arm and was pushed forward by him. Rumble! A group of cavalrymen were sent flying in all directions. The huge beast fell to the ground. The cavalryman on the back of the ferocious beast also fell to the ground. Rolling as he got up, the clanging sounds resounded endlessly. Marquis Langu had single-handedly withstood the ferocious cavalry. There was a whistling sound. The black-feathered arrow flew back and instantly pierced through 3 cavalrymen. They were nailed to the ground. Fresh blood flowed out. Bang! Bang! The peerless great demon thumped his own chest, emitting a thunderous sound. Many ferocious beasts knelt down and trembled in fear. One after another, guards stepped on the ferocious beasts and soared into the sky, holding spears, and swords as they charged at the Marquis. Marquis Langu's scarlet eyes narrowed. Then his huge palms slapped down. Bam! 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 One by one, the cavalry of Death's bodies shattered and turned into flowers of blood. The scene of the battle became extremely bloody in an instant. The nobles of District A, who were hiding in the distance, sucked in cold breaths. I can't believe Marquis Langu started a massacre in District A. Is this guy crazy? He's the ruler of District B, and now he came to District A to start a massacre? He will be punished by the Duke. Pai Dong and Pai, she looked at each other. When they saw the black-feathered arrow fly backward, their hearts skipped a beat. They obviously knew the chef's fighting prowess. To be able to fight 2 marquises in District B, his trump card must be extraordinary. Of course, the chef's strength was only that of a saint of the Great Path. However, he had used his trump card in District B, so he obviously could not use it in District A. Therefore, they exchanged a glance and saw the fanaticism in each other's eyes. Kill! Pai Dong and Pai she looked at each other and roared in unison. The next moment, 3 black-feathered arrows emerged in their hands. One of them knocked the bow, and the other shot the arrow. Creak! The 3 arrows were knocked on the arrows. Then they were pulled to the limit. When they released their hands, the bowstrings were pulled. Rumble! They turned into 3 beams of light and shot toward the distance, filling the air with deafening whistles. Kill! After releasing their hands, Pai Dong and Pai Shi roared. Pai Dong and Pai Shi roared. They stepped on their 2-headed dark phoenixes and charged at Marquis Langu. How could their cavalry of death be stopped by a Marquis? As the cavalry of death under cursed goddess soul, they had to prove their worth. The 2-headed phoenix let out a shrill cry and charged toward the great demon, Marquis Langu, and began to fight. Marquis Langu fought the cavalry of death while fighting the 2-headed phoenix. The phoenix flapped its wings and kept slashing its claws, leaving one claw mark after another on the great demon's body. Blood splashed everywhere. However, this only made the great demon more agitated. Marquis Langu's mountain-like fist smashed down and hit the phoenix's head, smashing it hard to the ground. Pai Dong and Pai Shi suddenly appeared behind the phoenix. They stepped into the air. Pai Dong knocked the bow, and Pai Shi drew an arrow. The arrow shot out. Slash! It pierced through Marquis Langu's chest. With a thud, the arrow pierced the great demon's chest and fell to the ground, blood gushing out of the wound. The 3 arrows shot out earlier were closing in on you, who was in the restaurant. Again, Xiao Ai was already scared out of her wits. However, she moved in front of you, closed her eyes, spread her arms, and stood in front of you. As long as Her Excellency Nethery is here, Xiao Ai will be here. Xiao Ai thought to herself. The black walk appeared again. It stood in front of Xiao Ai. 2 arrows darted about in the walk. The last one dodged the black walk and shot toward Bufang. Am I the target? How cunning. Bufang said faintly. Splash. The tea in the teapot swayed. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked at the black arrow. Boom. When the arrow was 1 inch away from his body, the vermilion robe let out a cry. Bufang's hair fluttered. Behind him, a vermilion bird spread its wings and soared into the sky. Its cry lingered in the 9 nether abyss. The spinning black-feathered arrow soon stopped spinning, and with a plop, it fell to the ground. Bufang exerted his strength. He threw the black walk out. Carrying the 2 arrows, it flew out of the restaurant. Boom! The black turtle constellation walk kept spinning. Buzz the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared and slashed down from the sky. It drew a horizontal line 1 meter in front of the restaurant. Those who cross the line will die. Bufang gulped down a mouthful of tea. With his hands clasped behind his back, he stepped out of the restaurant and stood at the door. Buzz the black turtle constellation walk flew out. Suddenly, he crushed them. Several iron guards were sent flying by the impact. The 2 arrows also pierced through several people. Xiao Ai looked at Bufang, who was blocking the door. Her eyes were filled with shock and excitement. So handsome. For some reason, the girl's heart was touched. Little Hu jumped onto Yu's shoulder, his little tail wagging. In the restaurant, a clanging sound rang out. Xiao Bai walked out, his purple mechanical eyes flashing. This puppet, Xiao Ai, glanced at Xiao Bai. Her heart seemed to throb. At this moment, Xiao Bai gave her a deep shock. On the table, the pearl monkey brain was still shaking, constantly emitting a fragrance. Foxy let out a squeak and rushed over. However, you caught him. You can't steal it. If you want to eat it, ask Bufang to make it for you. You shook her head. Little Hu drooped his head like a frosted eggplant, looking as if he had nothing to live for. Boom! Outside the restaurant, Bufang stood in front of the restaurant. He drew a horizontal line. Today was the restaurant's opening day, and Bufang did not want to start a killing spree. But now, it seemed that he could not. An arrow pierced a big hole in Marquis Langu's chest. However, the hole wiggled and quickly healed. After all, he was a great demon, and his fleshly body was extraordinary. Pai Dong and Pai Shi naturally did not think that this method could kill a marquis. The 2 brothers looked at each other tacitly. Then, they rushed out from both sides at high speed. The huge 2-headed phoenix was no match for Marquis Langu. After all, it was only a chaotic saint. Marquis Langu, who had transformed into a great demon, grabbed its wings. He was a sissy in human form, but when he transformed into a great demon, he became even more violent. Marquis Langu growled. Slash! He tore the wings of the 2-headed phoenix. Blood poured down like a waterfall. It spread to the ground of District A. The phoenix's wail rang out incessantly. However, Pai Dong and Pai Shi had seized the opportunity to sneak behind the marquis. They rushed toward the restaurant. Many cavalrymen passed by the peerless great demon and approached the restaurant. As for the line drawn by Bufang, they certainly did not put it in their eyes. Kill. For Her Excellency's soul. Kill. Pai Dong and Pai Shi shouted at the same time. Rumble. The line was crossed in an instant. The moment they crossed it, Bufong's eyes narrowed. Xiao Bai, Bufong said faintly. As soon as his voice rang out, Xiao Bai's figure emerged behind Bufong. Those who cross the line will be killed without mercy, Bufong said. Xiao Bai's purple eyes narrowed. Then, he disappeared from where he stood, as if he had teleported. A cavalryman riding a giant lizard crossed the line and rushed toward the restaurant. Xiao Bai appeared all of a sudden, stomping his foot. His fan-like palm punched, smashing the giant lizard's head. The iron guard on the cavalryman leaped up. His iron fist punched out, landing in front of Xiao Bai. He punched Xiao Bai's chest several times. A series of small punches hit Xiao Bai's chest. Xiao Bai was as still as a mountain. The iron guard was bewildered. Whitey fiercely smashed its head forward, directly smashing the iron guard's head into pieces. The cavalrymen who crossed the line were easily smashed by Xiao Bai. One soul after another floated in the void. In the distance, the peerless great demon stood on the phoenix, roaring. The cavalry of death was frightened. They pulled the savage beast back, not moving forward. Boom. Xiao Bai punched with his left and right fists. His fists collided with the two figures coming at him. Pai Dong and Pai Shi flew backward and landed hard on the ground. They landed outside the line and stared warily at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai stared at them with his purple eyes, unmoving like a mountain. The peerless great demon roared and forced the cavalry of death to retreat. Marquis Lang Gu had also fulfilled his promise. He had single-handedly deterred an army and forced them to retreat. Pai Dong and Pai Shi stared warily at Xiao Bai, then glanced at Bufong, who was standing next to Xiao Bai. This restaurant had stopped their cavalry of death. Creak! Suddenly, Pai Dong and Pai Shi's hearts skipped a beat. They raised their heads and looked behind them. A chariot rumbled. Behind the chariot were many experts. Both of them were overjoyed. "It's Her Excellency's soul," Pai Dong and Pai Shi said. Cursed goddess soul, clad in a tight robe, rode the chariot with a cold face. Her eyes were cold as she stared at the cavalry of death, the great demon, Bufong, and the restaurant. Ting-a-ling, cursed goddess soul, stood behind her. A thin figure stood there quietly. Although he was thin, he seemed to be connected to the universe. All the nobles who were watching sucked in their breaths. They knew that the restaurant was finished. The thin figure was none other than Duchess Tianlian. The Duchess of District A had finally appeared. Chapter 1742. The Duke of District A, Duchess Tianlian, cursed goddess soul's backer, was the supreme duke. As soon as the woman appeared, all the nobles sucked in their breaths. They knew that everything was over. Even with Marquis Lang Gu's help, even if that iron puppet could fight the Pai brothers, there was no suspense. There was no suspense in the face of a duke. Standing in the chariot, Soul stared coldly at Bufong. "I didn't expect that you, a chef, would really make it to District A," Soul said indifferently. Bufong's appearance surprised her. She was surprised by Bufong's appearance. However, as cursed goddess Nethery's only reliance apart from Duchess Yunlan, Bufong did not surprise her that he could survive until now. She had sent many experts to deal with him. But at least this was interesting, wasn't it? Bufong shook his head. Bufong had nothing to say about cursed goddess soul. This woman wanted to kill you. How could Bufong stand by and do nothing? Therefore, he was too lazy to say anything when they were not on the same wavelength. That made Bufong look even colder. Soul did not pay any attention to Bufong. You walked out of the restaurant with Xiao Ai and stood at Bufong's side. She raised her head and stared at Soul fearlessly. They were both cursed goddesses, but their statuses were as different as heaven and earth. Soul's influence in Void City was far superior to Yu's. Apart from a duke's support, you could not even see Soul's tail. Soul did not regard Nethery as a competitor at all. The only opponent she cared about was the one in the primitive universe. However, Soul did not mind getting rid of you first. It was always better to have one less competitor. Soul looked at Marquis Lang Gu, who had transformed into a giant demon. "Marquis Lang Gu, you disappoint me. Why are you standing against me?" Soul frowned. "Buzz, Marquis Lang Gu had transformed into his human form. She wrapped herself in her clothes and sighed. Lady Soul, little Mot's death was a huge blow to me. You know I was close to little Mot. Marquis Lang Gu said, but you don't have to stand against me. If you do, you'll be consigned to eternal damnation. Soul said. She stood on the chariot, her aura fluctuating. Anyone who stood against her would die. I was a little confused before, but now I'm sure of it. Perhaps it's because of faith. Marquis Lang Gu said, what a joke. Your faith should be me. Soul said. Her voice was filled with savagery. However, no one felt that there was anything wrong with this arrogance. Aunt Lien, kill them. Soul said. With Aunt Lien around, killing these people was simply a piece of cake. He even opened a restaurant in District A. There's no need for such a heretic to stay. Soul said coldly. The ancient beast, pulling her war chariot, also roared. The nobles were silent. The appearance of cursed goddess Soul had completely decided the outcome. Duchess Tianlian's appearance had completely tipped the scales of victory. If Nethery's protector were here, perhaps they could still put up a fight. But Duchess Yinlan was nowhere to be found. There was no suspense in the outcome of this battle. How could they fight? A marquis, an iron puppet, and a chef. Did they want to defeat a top chaotic saint existence? What a fool's dream. Duchess Tianlian sighed softly. She gave you a deep look, whose expression did not change. In fact, she quite admired you. What a pity. She flicked her finger. A petal suddenly fell from Duchess Tianlian's hand and pressed down on the crowd below. Marquis Lang Gu's pupils constricted. A duke. There was an insurmountable gap between a duke and a marquis. It was not as small as the gap between a count and a marquis. In fact, every duke was a top expert in Void City, an existence that no one dared to offend. Countess Xiaqiu was very strong, not weaker than a marquis. However, even the strongest of the three marquises could not touch the level of a duke. For countless eras, there had only been 3 dukes in Void City because it was too difficult to advance at their level. Today, I'll have a taste of the power of a duke. Marquis Lang Gu roared. His clothes were torn again, and he had transformed into a great demon. Then, he slapped the ground with both palms and rushed toward the petal. Duchess Tianlian sighed. She looked indifferently at Marquis Lang Gu, who had transformed into a great demon. The latter charged forward. Then, he collided with the petal. However, the light petal made the great demon feel extremely heavy. It was as if it was carrying the whole starry sky. His legs became extremely heavy, and they sank into the ground. Marquis Lang Gu, who had transformed into a great demon, was constantly being oppressed, and he gradually returned to his human form. With a ripping sound, he coughed up a mouthful of blood and flew backward. The petal, which was as light as a feather, came flying toward him. Marquis Lang Gu fell to the ground, his face ashen. Sure enough, the gap between him and a duke was too great. Cursed goddess Soul stood in midair, her expression unchanged. Even though Marquis Lang Gu used to be her man, she had betrayed her. She no longer cared about life and death. When Marquis Lang Gu begged her, she had the ability to help him. However, Marchioness Modi's death was not necessarily a bad thing for her. The death of a marquis meant that there was an empty marquis position. A marquis position was enough to make many people fight for it. She could provide the position to these competitors as long as they supported her. Therefore, for her, Marchioness Modi's death was actually a good thing. She had refused Marquis Lang Gu's request. That had led Marquis Lang Gu to the opposite side. However, because of this, she had gained a lot of support. She had not suffered a loss this time. Buzz, the petal flew over. The void cracked inch by inch, and it was the kind of silent collapse. This simple petal seemed to carry a supreme power. Bufong felt the pressure. His pupils constricted. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed, and a purple light shot into the sky. Buzz! Xiao Bai raised its huge arm. Suddenly, it transformed into a cylinder. At the center of the cylinder was a black hole, and a purple ray shot out of it. The ray collided with the petal in an instant. It was no ordinary petal. It carried a wisp of Duchess Tianlian's chaotic energy. That wisp of primal chaos aura was even heavier than a star. Rumble. The ray hit the ray and caused it to tremble violently. However, it stopped the petal from moving forward. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes narrowed. Duchess Tianlian was a little surprised and incredulous. Her attack was actually blocked by a puppet. This scene caused many people to be astonished. The nobles in the distance were in an uproar. Even Marquis Lang Gu could not block the petal, but it was blocked by a puppet. However, when they thought of the scene when the puppet fought Marchioness Modi, they understood why. Xiao Ai clutched Yu's arm tightly. She was extremely nervous. She did not expect that the cute Xiao Bai could unleash such a powerful force. It really hides its strength. Rumble. The petal kept drifting forward. The ground under White Yi's feet cracked, and its body kept moving backward. It was about to move into the restaurant. Bam! It was obvious that Whitey was having a hard time dealing with the Duke. Buffon took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed. Qilin had told him about the terror of District A. However, there was nothing he could do about it. He could not stay away from District just because it was terrifying. Cowering was not Buffon's style. In that case, he would give it a try. Ever since he had developed this thing with Nyohan-san, he had not used the perfect chaos pot of creation. Today, he would give it a try. Buffon's mind flickered. His mental force from the starry sky spread out. Buzz, heaven and earth were torn apart. Terrible energy spread in an instant. The chaos pot of creation slowly emerged from the system's storage space. That thing could only be left in the system's storage space, which had an extremely strong balance. If it stayed in the heaven and earth farmland, it might cause the whole world to be destroyed by the violent energy. Rumble. Marquis Lang Gu's heart shuddered. He felt terrified. He turned to look at Buffon in disbelief. Does this chef have an even more terrifying trick? He felt as if he was facing a duke. Cursed Goddess Soul frowned as well. There are too many unbelievable things about this chef. Aunt Lien, she said. She wanted Aunt Lien to kill the chef as soon as possible, lest something bad happened. Rumble. The ground around Buffon began to crack, and the rubble was destroyed. The terrible power made sweat trickle down Buffon's forehead. In fact, Buffon did not want to use it. He was afraid that half of Void City would be destroyed. However, now that he had been forced to this extent, he couldn't just watch everyone get killed. Could he? Good heavens! Marquis Lang Gu's heart was racing, and his legs were weak. A great sense of crisis was spreading. What exactly is that chef going to do? Duchess Tianlian frowned. Then, her figure flickered. She appeared in front of the petal. She reached out a finger and gently touched the petal. A wisp of chaotic energy swirled around her finger. The petal's power increased dramatically. Bam! Xiao Bai was defeated in an instant, and he fell to the ground. The purple rays disappeared, and steam rose from the petal. Meanwhile, the petal shot toward him at an even faster speed. She wanted to kill Buffon. She wanted to take advantage of the moment Buffon took out that terrifying thing to kill this chef. Buffon focused his eyes. He took a long breath. His hair waved uncontrollably. A crack appeared in the void. The crack was twisting and collapsing. In a trance, the crowd saw a golden walk. Xiao Ai was shivering all over. It was the feeling of death. The petal kept growing bigger and bigger in Buffon's eyes. Buffon gritted his teeth. Come on, explode. Explosive delicacies are the classics. Suddenly, everything seemed to stand still. Buffon felt the scene in front of him change. A heavy feeling of drowsiness overcame him. The scene in front of him twisted, then slowly turned into bubbles and dissipated. Put it away. Don't use it unless it's necessary. A gentle voice rang in Buffon's ears, as if it was whispering in Buffon's ear. Buffon paused. His drowsiness was gone. He didn't know when, but a slender figure appeared beside him. It was a woman shrouded in black mist. Other than her face, the rest of her body was constantly distorted. The woman smiled at Buffon and nodded. She raised a hand and flicked a finger. Immediately, the petal collapsed. Tianlian, You've gone too far. As Yinlan said, we are guardians, not thugs, the woman said indifferently. A rumbling sound echoed in the void. Behind the dreamlike woman, a chariot drove across the sky. A figure stood quietly on the chariot. The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became subtle. The nobles watching from a distance did not even dare to breathe. Their eyes widened in disbelief. Yu and Sol's eyes locked on the woman the moment she appeared. The familiar chariot and the familiar aura, the third curse goddess from the primitive universe, had finally shown up. Duchess Nightmare and her guardian curse goddess. For the first time, the three curse goddesses appeared together. Chapter 1743. Duchess Nightmare. She was one of the three supreme dukes of District A. As soon as she appeared, all the nobles in District A were surprised and made an uproar. However, what shocked them even more was the figure next to Duchess Nightmare. It was a graceful figure standing on the chariot. Originally, it was difficult for a chariot and a beautiful woman to match each other, making them seem incompatible. A woman's temperament was too sad, which would be too different from the iron-blooded chariot. However, the woman in front of them, standing on the chariot, was almost a perfect match. The former was sad, and the latter was gentle. However, her sadness and gentleness complemented the chariot. The third curse goddess, Hutu, the curse goddess from the primitive universe. All the nobles held their breath, and their eyes widened as they stared incredulously at the restaurant. All the nobles held their breaths. Their eyes widened as they stared incredulously at the restaurant. The three curse goddesses had appeared at the same time. Three curse goddesses had appeared at the same time. Three curse goddesses have appeared at the same time. Her Excellency Sol, Her Excellency Nethery, and Her Excellency Hood. I can't believe the three curse goddesses have appeared at the same time. Many people couldn't believe what they had just seen. They had imagined that the three curse goddesses would fight each other, but they did not expect it to happen so quickly. Moreover, it seemed that the two curse goddesses had joined forces to deal with Her Excellency Sol. This was really exciting. Duchess Tianlian focused her eyes and gave Duchess Nightmare a sad look. They were both dukes, and they knew very well that they could not do anything to each other. Therefore, after exchanging a glance, Duchess Tianlian did not continue to attack. There was no need for her to do so. Sol's eyes narrowed. Duchess Nightmare. She could not do anything to one of the three top dukes of District A. Tianlian, did you lure Yinlan away just to kill a curse goddess? Have you forgotten our mission? Duchess Nightmare looked at Duchess Tianlian with a frown. Duchess Nightmare looked like a dream, like a cloud of black smoke. Duchess Tianlian sighed and did not attack again. Standing on the chariot, Hutu glanced at Sol. The gazes of the two cursed goddesses collided inexplicably. Bufang glanced at Hutu. Was she a cursed goddess of the primitive universe? Strictly speaking, he could also be considered to have come from the primordial universe. Bufang had naturally heard of the name of Hutu, which was well known in myths and legends. However, Bufang did not expect that the latter would be a cursed goddess. Of course, there might be a connection between the two, but Bufang wasn't too sure. The appearance of Duchess Nightmare was probably to stop the battle. This battle was probably not going to happen. However, Duchess Nightmare wouldn't help him fight Duchess Tianlian. The most likely outcome of this battle was that everyone would leave in peace. Do what you have to do. However, if Cursed Goddess Sol insisted on fighting, it would be hard to say who would win. However, at least Bufang didn't take out the chaos pod of creation. He didn't know how powerful that thing was. If he could avoid it, it would be best not to. She's finally here. Cursed Goddess Hutu. Cursed Goddess Sol looked at the graceful woman on the chariot and exhaled slowly. This was the first time they met, so it was a little unexpected. The latter's calmness was completely beyond her imagination. Hutu didn't seem to care about anything. She had a kind of grace and nobility about her. She just glanced at Sol and said no more. The cavalry of death stood behind Cursed Goddess Sol, their auras fluctuating. Marquis Lang Gu also transformed into his human form and rose to his feet. As a duke, He naturally had nothing to do with the Duke's fight. However, it was hard to say who would win this battle. If Duchess Qinlian kept Duchess Nightmare busy while the others fought, that might be a real problem. It seemed that cursed goddess soul really had such a plan and thought. Rumble. Heaven and earth rumbled. All of a sudden, the void was torn apart. A voluptuous figure emerged from the void, stepping on the void as she walked over step by step. She was a graceful and elegant noblewoman with a profound temperament. As soon as she appeared, all the nobles sucked in their breaths. Duchess Yunlan had also appeared. 3 cursed goddesses, 3 dukes, and they all appeared in front of the restaurant at the same time. This battle had made the restaurant famous, and it had alarmed Void City. Duchess Yunlan's face was unsightly, as if she was holding back her anger. Duchess Tianlian's expression flickered when she saw Duchess Yunlan. She knew that it was basically impossible to kill Nethery today. What a pity. It's such a good opportunity. In the sky, Duchess Yunlan gave Sol a cold look. Your heart is not in the right place. A person like you is not qualified to inherit the throne of Void City. Duchess Yunlan shook her head in disappointment. Cursed Goddess Sol's expression did not change, but it was much colder. All of her plans, all of her schemes, had failed at this moment. She did not expect that the chef would be able to stop her cavalry of death. The 2 brothers, Pai Dong and Pai Shi, could fight a marquis together, but they could not do anything to him. She also did not expect that Marquis Langu would betray her. All of this made her very depressed. She gave you a deep look, then glanced at Buffon. After that, she turned and left with her cavalry. The cavalry of death thundered, and Sol slowly disappeared amidst the army of cavalrymen. Although she seemed to have suffered a loss in this battle, she was arrogant as if she was the victor. The nobles sucked in their breaths. Her Excellency Sol had retreated. She had given in. The nobles could not believe it. What did this mean? It meant that the competition for the position of Cursed Goddess had entered a white-hot stage. The restaurant had been perfectly preserved. Just like that, the first restaurant in Void City had established itself in District A, right under the nose of the Queen of Curses. Duchess Tianlian nodded at Yunlan and Nightmare, then sped into the distance. At this point, Sol's forces had all retreated. In midair, Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan greeted Buffon. Hutu, on the other hand, hovered beside Buffon. She looked straight at Buffon with her beautiful eyes, causing Buffon to be a little stunned. It's rare to meet someone from the primitive universe in Void City. I've been away from the primitive universe for a long time. I wonder how everything is. The woman said. Buffon paused. She had asked him about the primitive universe, but Buffon really did not know. Then again, according to Tantian, there were many almighty experts in the primitive universe, so it should be fine. Perhaps the invasion of the soul demons was a little troublesome for the primitive universe. But it was not a big problem. Hutu sighed, and a nostalgic look appeared in her eyes. Then, she put her hands behind her back and left. In fact, she was competing for the throne only to return to the primitive universe. To return to the place where she grew up. This was her only goal. Let's go, Nightmare. Hutu did not talk too much with Buffon. After a few words, she left. Before leaving, Hutu glanced at Nethery and nodded slightly. She seemed to notice that you were different from Sol. Sol's desire for the throne was almost paranoid. Cursed Goddess Nethery, on the other hand, did not seem to have any desire for the throne. Hutu could see through people's minds. So, for some reason, she had a good impression of you. Both of them nodded in greeting. Then they left. Hutu stepped on the chariot, and Nightmare turned into a puff of smoke and drifted away. Duchess Nightmare's faint voice could still be heard in the void. Hutu, that soul seems to have something to do with the soul demons. I hate soul demons the most. You have to work hard and win the throne? Got it, Hutu's indifferent voice answered her. Her vision returned. Duchess Yunlan descended and landed beside you. She looked you up and down and only breathed a sigh of relief when she found that the ladder was unscathed. Fortunately, you're all right. I can't believe I was tricked by Heaven's pity with her black hole and was trapped for a while. When Xiao Ai saw Duchess Yunlan, she immediately burst into tears. She rushed over and hugged Duchess Yunlan's thigh. Her days without Duchess Yunlan were filled with trepidation. She and you had almost lost the chance to see Duchess Yunlan. The noblewoman seemed to have a good relationship with Xiao Ai. After comforting her, she turned to Bufang. She glanced at Bufang, then at the restaurant behind her. The noblewoman could not help but burst out laughing. You really open a restaurant in District A. You're crazy. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth as he looked at the noblewoman, who could not stop laughing. Then, he returned to the restaurant with Xiao Bai and the others. Marquis Langu, wrapped in a robe, trotted to keep up with them. However, when Duchess Yunlan saw him, she took him away and greeted him. Marquis Langu felt wronged. He was originally a subordinate of Seoul, but now that he had joined Yu's side, he naturally had to be greeted. I'm under a lot of pressure when a duke greets me. It was an uproar of a great battle. Just like that, the battle between the three curse goddesses came to an end. All the nobles were a little stunned. Many people had thought that the battle would be one-sided. The weaker cursed goddess, Nethery, might be completely removed from the list by Seoul. However, the situation had become confusing once again. The heir of the Queen of Curses and the throne of Void City were still up for debate. Cursed Goddess Seoul occupied 60 to 70% of the power in Void City. Hutu, the Cursed Goddess, occupied 30 to 40% of the power in Void City. Nethery, the Cursed Goddess, had occupied a restaurant in Void City. Many people had strange expressions on their faces. Although Nethery had escaped the disaster, she was not the only one. However, she was just struggling at death's door, and the final outcome would not change. How far could she go by relying on a restaurant? Besides, whether or not this restaurant could continue to operate was another matter altogether. As for Bufang's restaurant, the nobles all chose to wait and see. Unlike Marquis Langu, they did not enter the restaurant and scrupulously and eat delicious food. Many nobles sent their men to keep an eye on the restaurant. Peace was restored in front of the restaurant. Marquis Langu rubbed his hands impatiently and stepped into the restaurant. He still had some pearl monkey brains left. After a hearty battle, being able to taste delicious food was truly too blissful. The noblewoman followed behind Nethery, curiously stepping into the restaurant. She really didn't expect Bufang to really open a restaurant in District A. She was no stranger to this chef. Back then, you had picked him up from the restaurant. But now Bufang had opened his restaurant here. Interesting. How brave of you to open a restaurant under the Queen of Curses' nose. The noblewoman looked at Bufang and said. Of course, she was more curious about why the Queen of Curses was indifferent to this restaurant. Was there something strange about this restaurant that she didn't know about? Many of the curse goddesses she had summoned were taken away from the restaurant. She was no stranger to restaurants. However, the only people who could really open a restaurant in Void City were those who could not. Bufang was the only one who could. Bufang was the only one who dared to open a restaurant under the Queen of Curses' nose. The noblewoman didn't stay long. Soon, then, she left the restaurant with Nethery. If you wanted to stand out in the competition among the cursed goddesses, you needed to keep getting stronger. The noblewoman, on the other hand, was to take you to become stronger. As for Xiao Ai, she was left in the restaurant. Under her lifeless gaze, she gloriously became a waitress in the restaurant. At the same time, Bufang's restaurant had officially opened in Void City. Of course, it was not unexpected at all. Although many nobles were paying attention to his restaurant, no one dared to step into it or order a dish. However, no one dared to take even half a step inside. No one dared to order any of the delicacies. No one dared to be the first to break this taboo. Bufang, on the other hand, needed to think of a way to break this taboo in people's hearts. Chapter 1744. In the eyes of many nobles, the restaurants of Void City were taboo. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Many people even wanted to destroy the restaurant. These people had an unparalleled faith in the Queen of Curses. Of course, for Bufang, he also needed to think about how to increase the restaurant's popularity. To make the people of Void City accept the restaurant, he might need a dish that could impress them. As for what this dish was, Bufong had not figured out yet. However, Bufong was not in a hurry. In fact, at their level of strength, time was nothing. For them, time was a long time. In the restaurant, Bufong pulled out a chair and curled up in it. Bufong closed his eyes and breathed rhythmically. The restaurant was deserted, and almost no one came to visit. It had been like this for several days. Over the past few days, Bufong had come up with many ideas. He had cooked extremely fragrant delicacies and wanted to use the rich fragrance to seduce the most primitive desire for delicacies in these people's hearts. However, it was rare that the nobles of Void City were not attracted by the food. Even when the aroma was so strong that it filled the whole city, these nobles did not waver. Perhaps some of them had some desire in their hearts. They kept smacking their lips, wanting to taste the food. However, when they thought of the queen's taboo, they could not help but suppress their desire. This surprised Bufong. Barbecue, teppanyaki, scallion pancakes. Bufong had tasted all kinds of food that could smell the best. At most, these nobles would become restless, but they wouldn't sink into it, and they wouldn't be bewitched by delicious food. The queen's taboo deeply affected the nobles of Void City in their hearts. Of course, ever since Marquis Langu broke the taboo, he had given up everything and only wanted to eat delicious food. Every day, he ate until his mouth was covered in grease. He even planned to make his home in the restaurant. Of course, he was driven out by Bufong. Marquis Langu had also given up on being a soul drummer and planned to be a qualified soul foodie. His love for food came from the depths of his soul. Ever since he ate the pearl monkey brain, he couldn't help himself. He had tried the other delicacies in Bufong's restaurant: egg fried rice, braised pork, sweet and sour ribs. Each piece of meat made him tremble with happiness. However, Marquis Langu alone was not enough to influence the other nobles. Many of them were still watching vigilantly. Impossible. Owner Bu, you can't make the nobles in District A accept the definition of delicacies. Xiao Ai sat at the dining table, eating braised pork, and said to Bufong seriously. Bufong was curled up on the chair, sipping his wine as he glanced at her. The charm of delicious food lies in its attraction to the palate and control over the taste buds. However, the experts of Void City are not weak, and they have self-restraint. It's obviously impossible for you to lure them in with just the aroma. Xiao Ai had been very satisfied recently. Although she did not know where Lord Nethery had gone, she was very happy to be a waitress. He could eat Bufong's delicacies every day. Because Bufong's delicacies did not attract those customers, she could only digest them internally. Barbecue, hot pot, scallion pancakes, teppanyaki, and so on. Xiao Ai's soul was throbbing from all the food. She still remembered the guilt she felt toward the queen when she ate Bufong's noodles for the first time. But now, that guilt was nowhere to be found. All that was left in her heart now was the belief in food. In this regard, she was the same as Marquis Langu. Xiao Ai grabbed the spoon, waved it, and said seriously to Bufong, "Owner Bu, the first thing you have to think about now is to let them eat. They will not step into the restaurant unless they have tasted the thrill that goes deep into their bones." Bufong paused. Xiao Ai's words made Bufong fall silent. She made a lot of sense. To put it simply, she was forcing herself on them. Her words were crude, but her reasoning was not crude. She had to let them taste the delicacies first. Bufong nodded. He toyed with the wine glass in his hand and drained it in one gulp. But they won't easily taste normal delicacies, then cook unusual delicacies. Owner Bu, you're such a great chef, so you should know how to cook unusual delicacies, right? Xiao Ai said matter-of-factly. She scooped up a piece of jelly-like braised pork and stuffed it in her mouth. The oil spread, and the rich taste of meat filled her mouth. The soft and tender feeling made her tremble all over, and her cheeks turned red. Shyness seemed to spread from the bottom of her heart. Unusual delicacies? Use dark cuisine to open up the market? Bufong was stunned. He poured himself a glass of wine. This time he did not drink it. Instead, He narrowed his eyes as he looked at Xiao Ai, whose mouth was covered in oil. Her words seemed to have opened up his mind, and his eyes seemed to have widened. Since normal delicacies could not open up the market, he would use dark cuisine. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly. He made up his mind. Stinky tofu was definitely out of the question. Many people had seen it before. Bu Fong had used it in the ring fighting pit. Therefore, this time, Bu Fong planned to use other dark cuisines. There were many dark dishes, and stinky tofu was not the only dish. Let's do it. Bu Fong suddenly jumped up from his chair. Standing in the restaurant, Little Hu, who was lying under the pathfinder standing tree, immediately became energetic. With a swoosh, it disappeared and reappeared on Bu Fong's shoulder. Xiaopi also flew over and landed on Bu Fong's shoulder, blowing bubbles. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes and raised his hand to rub Little Hu and Xiaopi's heads. Let's go to cause trouble, Bu Fong said softly. Yes, Bu Fong was going to stir up trouble. Since the rich aroma of food could not arouse the noble's desire for delicacies, Bu Fong decided to do something about it. Since the rich aroma of food could not arouse the noble's desire for delicacies, Bu Fong had no choice but to use some extreme methods. Only those who had tasted the ultimate dark cuisine could understand the value of delicacies. Of course, not all dark cuisines tasted bad. Xiao Ai stuffed the last piece of braised pork into her mouth. Her eyes widened as she watched Bu Fong walk out of the restaurant with his hands clasped behind his back. Marquis Langu, on the other hand, was lounging in his chair, picking his teeth. He was a little surprised when he saw Bu Fong. What delicious food does this little chef want to cook this time? I can't miss it. Marquis Langu rolled his eyes and quickly followed. His trust in Bu Fong's cooking had reached the level of faith. Lil Hu narrowed her eyes and cheered. She was very happy. Stir up trouble? Is there something delicious to eat? The group of nobles who had been watching the restaurant froze when they saw Bu Fong walk out. Outside the restaurant, the street that had been reduced to ruins by the previous battle had been restored to its original state. In Void City, the recovery rate of damaged buildings was very high. Bu Fong did not go far after he walked out of the restaurant. Instead, he marked out a small area in front of the restaurant. Then, with a thought, Bu Fong made a move. A divine tree appeared in front of him. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun. The divine tree was cut in half in an instant, and the surface was smooth. The knife rose and spun like a phoenix. Soon, a plaque appeared behind Bu Fong. A line of words was carved on it. The god of cooking little restaurants' great dark cuisine trial. Those who are brave are invited to challenge us. Those who succeed will be rewarded with a wisp of chaotic energy. When Bu Fong had finished writing, the dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. He took a step back, satisfied, and a strange smile came over his face. Great dark cuisine trial? Those who succeed will be rewarded with a wisp of chaotic energy? Xiao Ai's eyes widened in disbelief as she read the words Bu Fong had written on the plaque. Honor Bu, are you crazy? Calm down. Bu Fong glanced at Xiao Ai. Putting aside what dark cuisine is, how are you going to give away chaotic energy? Xiao Ai looked at Bu Fong speechlessly. What kind of teammate did Nethery find? Marquis Langu picked his teeth with a toothpick in his mouth and chuckled. Bu Fong, little chef, are you in a desperate situation? Only chaotic saints have chaotic energy, and a peak saint of the Great Path might be able to control it. Don't talk big. If a god emperor completes the challenge, won't you have to give him chaotic energy? How are you going to give it to him? Marquis Langu rolled his eyes gracefully and pointed at Bu Fong with his finger. I have my ways. First, they have to complete the challenge, said Bu Fong. While Bu Fong was talking to Xiao Ai and Marquis Langu, the news had already spread like wildfire. Many people had seen Bu Fong's plaque, so the content on it was naturally exposed. Give away chaotic energy? How can this chef be so arrogant? What makes him think he can make such a bold claim? However, for many saints of the Great Path, Bu Fong's words were full of temptation. If they could really get the chaotic energy, they would be able to save many years of hard cultivation. Of course, there were also rational people. What many people were concerned about was Bu Fong's challenge. This challenge was very interesting. It was too difficult. No one would take part in it. It was too easy. The chef might not be able to take out the chaotic energy. Therefore, this chef had forced himself into a dilemma. For a moment, the news spread like wildfire. All the nobles in District A turned to look at it. The restaurant had become the laughingstock of District A. No one dared to go to the restaurant to eat. Its business was so bad that it could not even be compared to the peddlers selling illegal pills next to the alchemy workshop. What was this restaurant trying to do now? In front of the restaurant, Bu Fong took out the White Tiger Heaven stove. He also placed tables in front of it. Owner Bu, what is this dark cuisine you mentioned? Braised pork? Xiao AI asked curiously when she saw that she could not stop Bu Fong. Of course, she was still not optimistic about Bu Fong's chances. Opposite the restaurant was an alchemy workshop, which was bustling with people. Many people noticed the scene. The alchemy workshop was huge, at least many times larger than the restaurant. Inside the workshop was a huge shop that looked like square. Among them, there were alchemists sitting cross-legged in the square, refining pills. These alchemists came from a small universe that produced alchemists. Although it was a small universe, alchemists in this universe were very popular. These alchemists were all top alchemists. Their alchemy skills were superb. They were performing alchemy, using the finished pills to stimulate the nobles of Void City to sell their pills. Many alchemists scoffed at the competitors opposite them. A restaurant was simply ridiculous. Today, many people in the alchemy workshop had gathered around the restaurant curiously. In fact, Bu Fong's restaurant did not lack traffic. It lacked customers to break the taboo and taste the food. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched slightly at Xiao AI's question. Dark cuisine? You know stinky tofu, right? Bu Fong pursed his lips. I know. It smells really bad, but it tastes really good. Xiao AI nodded and smacked her lips. Clearly, stinky tofu had left a deep impression on her. In the world of dark cuisine, stinky tofu is only the beginning. Canned herring, cursed chicken, fire ant cookies, nightmare larva jelly beans. These are the highlights. These dark cuisines are the first step to breaking the taboo. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth curved upward, and his eyes gleamed with the light to stir up trouble. Xiao AI froze. She felt her hair stand on end just by listening to the jargon that came out of Owner Bu's mouth. So, Owner Bu was going to do something big. Chapter 1745. Can dark cuisine really break the taboo? Xiao AI stared blankly at Bu Fong, who had the corners of his mouth curled into a confident smile. She had never heard of those technical terms, but they did not sound like gourmet food. Seeing Xiao AI's confused look, Bu Fong touched his chin and did not explain much. He didn't explain too much. You'll know soon enough. The customers who had gathered in the alchemy workshop had unknowingly gathered around the tunnel that Bu Fong had drawn. How dare they use chaotic energy as a gimmick? Interesting. I'm afraid this restaurant is going to do something desperate. I'd like to see what kind of challenge this little restaurant will come up with. Many nobles whispered to each other and laughed in a relaxed manner. All they had to do was to calmly watch the restaurant make a fool of itself. They did not take the so-called chaotic energy seriously, nor did they take it to heart. However, if someone else completed the challenge and the restaurant refused to hand over the chaotic aura, they would have a reason to ask the Duke to seal the restaurant. This would give those who had always wanted to destroy the restaurant some opportunities and channels. Of course, they did not know what kind of horror awaited them next. Bu Fong did not explain too much to Xiao AI. It was better to take action than to say too much. The noble woman returned with you. In fact, she would bring you back every 3 or 4 days. The main reason was that she had become a loyal customer of the restaurant. In her opinion, tasting some delicacies occasionally had always been a way to spice up life. Every time she went to fetch the cursed goddess, she would ask the chef to cook a dish for her. Of course, at that time, her request was rejected by Bu Fong. When she returned with Nethery, she was slightly taken aback when she saw the sea of people. What are you doing? The noblewoman could not help but widen her eyes when she saw Bu Fong setting up a stall in front of the restaurant. "I'm cutting my way through the thorns for the restaurant's future," Bu Fong said, glancing at the noblewoman. "Speak normally." The noblewoman rolled her eyes. You looked at Bu Fong curiously. Was Bu Fong planning to stir up trouble? "In order to attract customers to the restaurant, I have no choice. These people are too prejudiced against food. They need the impact of dark cuisine," Bu Fong said. The noblewoman's mouth twitched. Dark cuisine? Just from the sound of it, one could tell that it was something incredible. However, the noblewoman did not say anything. She was a little curious. After so many years, it was rare for there to be something fun. She could stand by the side and watch. She glanced at the board and saw the rewards written on it. She was speechless. No wonder it could attract so many people. Primal Chaos Chi was such a rare and precious item. Yet this fellow actually used it as a reward. Bu Fong ignored the lady. He walked in front of the White Tiger Heaven stove and faced the nobles. "Does anyone want to sign up for the challenge? The first round of registration will be limited to 10 for now," Bu Fong said. As soon as these words were spoken, it caused an uproar below the stage. The nobles whispered to each other. Many people did not trust Bu Fong and felt that Bu Fong might not be able to fulfill his promise. Some people, on the other hand, did not know what the so-called challenge was, and they were afraid of making a fool of themselves. Don't worry about the promise. The promise made by Cooking God Little Restaurant will be fulfilled. I guarantee it with the integrity of Marquis Langu, Bu Fong said seriously. Marquis Langu. The nobles below the stage burst out laughing. I didn't know this paralyzed chef could joke. Where did Marquis Langu get his integrity from? However, after hearing Bu Fong's words, many people were tempted. Not long after, 10 people walked out. There were indeed 10 slots. Many people were slightly surprised when they saw the 10 nobles. That's Master Jin Yong from the Alchemy Workshop. He also chose to accept the challenge. Master Jin Yong has been stuck at the level of a Saint of the Great Path for a long time. He needs a wisp of primal chaos energy as an opportunity to break through. Hey, isn't that Viscount Daoluin? He's also participating. Many nobles were very surprised by the contestants. Bu Fong glanced at the 10 contestants. The reward of primal chaos energy was very useful. At least, it had attracted some people to try it. Bu Fong looked at the 10 people with a straight face and twitched the corner of his mouth slightly. "Your Excellency, can you tell us the rules of the challenge now?" Master Jin Yong said, looking at Bu Fong. As an alchemist, he looked down on chefs, so he did not speak politely. The other nobles also looked curiously at Bu Fong. Most of them had been stuck at the level of a Saint of the Great Path for a long time and needed primal chaos energy, so they took part in the challenge. "Don't worry," Bu Fong said. He asked the 10 contestants to sit at the table. The 10 people sat face to face at the long and narrow table, on which were placed chopsticks, spoons, knives, forks, and white napkins. "Your challenge is to taste a dark cuisine, a unique food," Bu Fong said. "Is it delicious food? We don't eat delicious food, but we believe in the queen. If it's delicious food, I give up." A nobleman shouted. This nobleman was a woman, and her curly blonde hair spread out behind her. "Well, it's not really delicious food. Dark cuisine is the opposite of delicious food," Bu Fong said after thinking for a moment. In fact, what he said was not wrong. With that said, many nobles looked at each other and didn't say anything else. In fact, it did not matter if it was really delicious food. After all, the reward of primal chaos energy was enough for them to take the risk. It was the same principle that interests moved people. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back, and Little Hu lay on his shoulder. "Then are you guys ready?" Bu Fong asked seriously, looking at these people. Hearing Bu Fong's question, the nobles felt a little worried. However, they all nodded. With an interested look on her face, the noblewoman crossed her legs and sat in the distance. She wanted to see what Bu Fong had up his sleeve. "Very well. Let's begin the challenge of the first dark cuisine. I wish you good luck," Bu Fong said. Then, Bufong turned around and walked in front of the white tiger heaven stove. Bufong already had the idea of the first dark cuisine in his mind. This dish was even more brutal than stinky tofu. Only those who had experienced it personally would understand that kind of bitterness. Bufong's mind flickered. He exchanged for a can of herring from the system. It was a classic Swedish canned fish, of course. In addition to the can of herring, Bufong also exchanged for several herrings from the system. Thinking of the next dish, Bufong was a little excited. He played with the can of herring in his hand. It did not leak, so there was no smell that would make people despair. Bufong did not intend to let it leak so early. His hand shook. He used the exquisite spirit wheat from the heaven and earth farmland to make dough. Kneading and making dough were the normal steps of making pastries. Many people didn't take it seriously, and there were even some who frowned. Is this chef trying to take advantage of this opportunity to trick them into eating delicious food? Some people had this doubt in their hearts. Impossible. We've endured for so long. How could we be deceived by such a trick? Let's see. This chef should have more tricks. He put the dough aside and let it rise. Bufong took out a silver herring. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand, twirling it. After that, Bufong began to process the herring in his hand. After removing the internal organs, he cut the herring in half, took the upper half, and wrapped the herring's head. Bufong deliberately made the herring's eyes brighter. He stuffed the marinated herring's upper body into the dough, leaving the herring's head exposed. One by one, he inserted them into the dough. They could see the herring's bright eyes, looking at the sky. He took the can of herring. Bufong narrowed his eyes, looking around. Then he released his mental force, wrapping the can to prevent the smell from leaking and causing discomfort. Swish! Bufong opened the swollen can of herring. The moment he opened the can, a pungent smell rushed into Bufong's face. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. He rolled his eyes. The expression on his face suddenly scrunched up. It's really King Stinky. Stinky tofu is no match for this smell. It was hard to imagine the feeling when this thing was stuffed into one's mouth. Perhaps only the brave dared to eat it. The others couldn't smell it, because it was isolated by Bufong. They only saw that the moment Bufong opened the can, the expression on his face changed dramatically. His facial features seemed to be stacked together. At that moment, there seemed to be despair surging in his eyes. Xiao AI was bewildered. She didn't know that the expressionless owner, Bu, could make so many expressions. But this expression, what did it mean? At the table, the 10 challengers also narrowed their eyes. They seemed to have smelled something unusual. This challenge seemed a little frightening. Bufong wrapped the can of fat herring with his divine power, took out the juicy can, dug out the center of the dough, and stuffed the herring into it. Then, the moment Bufong's face turned red, he stuffed the dough into the black turtle constellation wok and began to bake it. He exhaled softly. Bufong felt that he had been reborn. The smell was so strong that it almost made one faint. Wiping his hands with a white towel, Bufong waited for time. Owner Bu, has the challenge begun? A diner at the table asked uneasily. He seemed to be infected by the atmosphere. Don't worry. Haste makes waste. Bufong glanced at the diner and said. Master Jinyong was very calm. As an alchemist, what had he not seen? This kind of challenge was just a small matter. Time was ticking away. On the other hand, the nobles surrounding them were extremely curious. The passage of time meant that the challenge was approaching. They were very curious about this challenge. Ding! The black turtle constellation wok rang out with a crisp sound. Bufong's eyes lit up. Then, he glanced at the 10 diners at the table. His little eyes made the 10 diners' hearts sink. Even the noblewoman pursed her lips and widened her beautiful eyes curiously. You looked at Bufong and felt that Bufong was up to something. Little Who kept squeaking. For her, only eating could relieve her worries. Phew! Bufong exhaled and rubbed his hands. Then, he slowly lifted the lid of the black turtle constellation wok. Little Who put her head in front of the wok, her eyes wide and her mouth watering. She wondered what kind of delicacy Bufong had cooked this time. The next moment, Bufong reached out and slowly pulled out a plate from the wok. On the plate, there was a piece of baked pastry. The art of baking, the dough was baked to a golden color. The middle part was milky white like cream. Around the pastry, there were several herring heads, standing straight up. The herring's eyes were bright, looking at the sky. The herring had also been roasted, and they gave off a strange smell. Of course, that was not the point. The point was the smell of the pastry. The moment the pastry appeared, Little Who was stunned. In the next moment, he covered his nose with his little paws, and tears flowed down from his little eyes. He took a few steps back, and his tail drooped on the ground. White foam gushed out from her mouth. The stench from the herring pastry almost made Little Who's heart stop beating. Bufong wrinkled his nose, looking at the 10 diners in the distance. The first challenge, dark cuisine, herring pastry. Look at the starry sky. The first person to eat the herring pastry. Challenge successful. Bufong wrinkled his nose, saying, that stench really made people want to cry. Accept the challenge, brave people. Chapter 1746. Stargazing, stargazing your sister. A dense odor gushed out, causing everyone to almost faint. The smell was especially strong, as if the smell of decay and stinky fart were piled together and released at the same time. It was as if 10,000 durians were piled up together, and the stench was fermented and then exploded at the same time. The herring heads and bright eyes made everyone feel a little scared. Damn it, these pampered nobles had never smelled such a smell before. Their hair stood on end as they quickly retreated. The nobles, who had planned to watch the fun, couldn't stand the smell at all. They circulated their divine power and sealed their 6 senses. However, what made their hair stand on end was, even with their cultivation bases, they couldn't seal the stench. It was like maggots in the bones, deeply entangling their souls. Was this a delicacy? Fairy tales were all lies. This stench was even more stinky than the cursed ditch outside District D. This chef couldn't have really moved the water from the ditch here, could he? It was really killing them. The first to be hit by the stench was Little Who. At that moment, she was so smelly that she doubted her life. The moment the stench hit her, there were only 3 thoughts left in her mind. Where am I? Who am I? Where am I? Then Little Who fell straight to the ground, foaming at the mouth. Little Who swore that it was the most disgusting smell she had ever smelled in her life. She had never smelled such a stinky fart. As a chef, Bufong couldn't stand it anymore. Stinky. It was really stinky. However, he had to take out the dark cuisine that he had created, even if he had to shed tears. Stargazing was a famous dish on Earth. It was made by a top British royal chef. Herring was a favorite ingredient of Europeans. So many delicacies were derived from it. Canned herring was one, and stargazing was another. Of course, Bufong specially combined the two. He wanted these people to feel the impact of the dark cuisine from Earth. He had to admit that the stench of the stinky tofu was still a little worse than this enhanced version of stargazing. What the hell is this smell? Blarg, damn it, Blarg. I can't take it anymore, Mama. It stinks. Isn't it written in the ancient books that the food cooked by chefs is fragrant? The nobles retreated as if they had seen something terrifying. Their faces darkened. They were not soul demons, so they did not crave this stinky delicacy. When a stargazy pie appeared, all of them felt their hair stand on end, and their godheads trembled violently. Bufong placed the stargazy pie on the dining table and exhaled deeply. This is the first dish for today's challenge, Bufong said. The moment this dish appeared, the 10 challengers at the table were dumbstruck. Challenge? This was a real challenge. This stench, could it be the evolved version of the disgusting food in District D? Was he not giving them a way out? No wonder this chef dared to use chaotic energy as a reward. Just the smell alone was enough to make one feel despair. However, this level of stench was enough to make them retreat. There was a look of determination in the eyes of the 10 challengers. They were not afraid of death for the chaotic energy. Zhen Yong, the alchemy master of the alchemy workshop, was calm and collected. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, as if he had everything planned out. This stench was nothing to him. It was stinky, but it was still within an acceptable range. When alchemists like them accidentally spoiled the elixir pills, that kind of smell would only be worse than this. So, just this challenge alone. I'm sorry, but I'm going to take this chaotic energy. Blarg, finally, one of the diners could not stand it anymore. His stomach churned, and he could no longer stand the stench. These people were all people with experience. Many of them had seen the disgusting food in District D. So, when they smelled the stench, they immediately thought of that food. Naturally, they could not control their stomach and were eliminated. First kill, second kill, third kill. When Bufong saw the 3 diners give up, cover their mouths, and run out of the table, he sighed softly. The stargazy pie had achieved 3 kills as soon as it appeared. However, there were still 7 diners left, which was beyond Bufong's expectation. Not only that, among the 7 diners, there were still 2 who were calm and not affected at all. Interesting, it's more challenging this way. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched slightly. In the distance, the noblewoman's face darkened the moment she smelled the stench. Her beautiful face showed that she did not know whether to laugh or cry. This chef is crazy. She thought that Bufong would come up with some challenge. In the end, it was purely to disgust people. Was that a delicacy? Was there such a stinky delicacy in the world? This chef was really different from all the chefs she knew before, which chef didn't cook delicious food for the sake of cooking fragrant dishes. In the end, this chef's dish was so stinky that it made the whole place stink. You covered her nose, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Xiao AI almost fainted. It turned out that Owner Bu was like this today. She finally saw his true colors. Nethery, on the other hand, was not surprised. After all, Bufong had a criminal record. In the alchemy competition in the past, she had seen Bufong use stinky tofu to make others explode their furnaces. Of course, the stinky tofu stench was really nothing compared to this kind of stench. The stinky tofu stench was acceptable. However, this F** King Stargazy pie was simply stinky. You even suspected that this dish could not be eaten at all. That's right, there's still 7 challengers. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong looked at the 7 people and nodded expressionlessly. In the distance, the nobles, who had retreated hundreds of steps, were terrified. Looking at the 7 people sitting at the table, they felt a wave of admiration. Experts. District is indeed full of hidden talents. Little chef, are you trying to disgust us with the stench? This kind of challenge is too easy. You've disappointed me a little. Master Jin Yong smiled faintly. Viscount Dao Luan was an elegant man. He smiled faintly. Little chef, I hope you can keep your promise after the challenge is over. The blonde girl with wavy hair also chuckled. Sure enough, it's not a delicacy. But, you think you can drive us away with just a stench? You're underestimating us. The blonde girl was quite famous in District A. She was also a viscount, and her name was Viscount Ash. Provoked by the 3 people, Bufong raised his brows slightly. He glanced at them and shook his head. Don't worry, the challenge has just begun, Bufong said. The faces of the 7 people at the table froze. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufong's hand. He took out 7 blue and white porcelain plates. Bufong was about to cut the stargazy pie open with the dragon bone kitchen knife. As Bufong said, the show had just begun. The stench of the stargazy pie wasn't just on the surface. It was a kind of smell with substance. Holding the dragon bone kitchen knife, Bufong scanned the crowd. Then, he raised the corner of his mouth. The rule of the challenge is to finish eating the stargazy pie. Everyone, his words fell. Everyone's eyes narrowed. The nobles around them felt their hair stand on end. Bufong's kitchen knife fell. He cut open the stargazy pie. The moment it was cut open, dense black light burst out from within. The light beams were extremely straight, shooting out in all directions. 1, 2, 3. The black light seemed to shoot out from the gates of hell. It was terrifying. Viscount Ash, even though she was very arrogant. However, the instant the black light surged, beads of sweat unknowingly appeared on his forehead. Asterisk gulp. Asterisk Viscount Daluin swallowed a mouthful of saliva as a hint of vigilance appeared on his elegant face. Master Gignon was very calm. He was immune to the stench. Alchemists who had smelled the smell of an exploding alchemy furnace should not be afraid of this stench. To them, this stench was child's play. Swish, the dragonbone kitchen knife sank into it. The stargazy pie was actually a kind of pastry, somewhat like cheese. As the dragonbone kitchen knife sank into it, it cut out a piece as if it was cutting a cake. Swish, an even more ferocious stench billowed out. Rumble, the sky changed color. It was a kind of black cloud, with an oily green color in it. Bufong's eyes were very serious, as if he was under great pressure. Splash. He poured the stargazy pie into a blue and white porcelain bowl. The black sauce from the can of herring flowed out. It was still bubbling. When the bubbles reached their limit, they burst. With a bang, the stench surged in all directions like a wave of air. The stench hit them in the face. The expressions of the 7 diners changed instantly. One of the diners finally could not hold on anymore. Imagining that he was going to eat this thing, he could not control his stomach at all. He kicked his legs. Together with his chair, he fell to the ground. I give up. Blurg. This person rolled and crawled away. However, none of the surrounding nobles looked down on him. Everyone looked at him with sympathy. They could imagine that stench. It was a wise decision for him to back down. It could only be said that those who were still persevering were all brave warriors. Bufong's face did not change. His face was expressionless. He unhurriedly cut the herring pastry and the stargazy pie into pieces, placing them in front of the diners. Some people stared at the stargazy pie, which was like a well-cut cake. They looked at the herring's eyes, then they directly spat out. 1 kill, 2 kill, 3 kill, 4 kill. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. Looking at the 4 people who had given up, he couldn't help but reveal a playful look. The stargazy pie. Did you think that the freshly baked stench was all it had? What was more terrifying was the stink of stairs, the stench that climbed higher. The moment it was cut, the herring wrapped in the stargazy pie flowed out. That stench was at its peak. The yellow pastry, the dark green juice of the can. Viscount Ash's face turned completely black. But she was still persevering. Her towering chest heaved up and down. Every time she took a deep breath, her face would darken. Viscount Daluin boasted of his elegance. He had a deep understanding of his own elegance. But looking at the twisted yellow and dark green stargazy pie, he chose despair. His hands, which were holding the knife and fork, were trembling, and his pores opened. His shaking became more and more violent, and the chair made creaking sounds. White foam gushed out of his mouth. In the end, he fell to the ground. He rolled his eyes. His confidence, his elegance in front of the stargazy pie. He was completely crushed. The moment Viscount Daluin fainted, Viscount Ash, who had a big wave on her head, could not stand it anymore. She raised her hand and covered her mouth. Tears kept flowing. She was like a woman in love whose heart was broken. Her tears were like a broken bead curtain, falling down uncontrollably. The one who cried was sad. Bufong looked a little melancholy when he saw that. In fact, the stargazy pie was really delicious. Bufong sighed. Another double kill. The nobles all grabbed their hair in despair. They did not expect that 9 of the 10 challengers would be killed by a dish. They were all elites of District A. How could they lose face in front of Dish? Now, there was only one hope left. That was the alchemist, Master Gignon. Could he create a miracle? All the nobles fixed their eyes on Master Gignon. At this moment, Master Gignon's composure had long since disappeared. This kind of stink had long since exceeded the range of what he could accept. This smell, it was worse than the smell of 100 pill furnaces exploding at the same time. Did the person who made this stench want to take revenge on society? But for the sake of chaotic energy, Master Gignon's eyes were full of determination. With trembling hands, he picked up the spoon. He scooped it up. yellow pastries, bubbling dark green canned herring sauce that emitted an overwhelming stench. Master Xinjiang's teeth seemed to be chattering. Bufang's pupils constricted. The surrounding people held their breath. They watched as Master Xinjiang slowly brought the spoon to his mouth. Chapter 1747. When the stench reached the extreme, it might really become a fragrance. However, that was because they had not smelled the stench today. Today, the nobles of District A suffered an unprecedented blow to their hearts. They even felt that the descriptions of food in fairy tales had completely changed. What happened to food that smelled good? Why was it that in reality, the food cooked by this chef was actually so stinky that it had no friends? Master Xinjiang was really brave. He even dared to stuff such a thing into his mouth. He was indeed worthy of being the chief alchemist of the alchemy workshop and the top expert of the alchemy universe. In fact, only Master Xinjiang himself understood the grievance in his heart. The closer the food on the spoon got, the more agitated his heart became. It beat more and more violently, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. That feeling could only be described as worse than death. Why'd he take part in such a challenge? Why'd he take it so hard? When he thought of his provocation toward Bufang, he began to regret it. The stench of an exploding alchemy furnace was nothing to him. He thought he could calmly face the stench of the whole universe. But the moment the stargazy pie appeared, only then did he realize he was still too young. The vastness of the universe was unimaginable. Gulp. The nobles in the distance widened their eyes and clenched their fists. They watched as Master Xinjiang was about to stuff the food into his mouth. The juice of the canned herring was not black, but because it had been heated and through various means, its color had become a little strange. The sticky juice, which should have been transparent, was still sticky, but it had become opaque. The stargazy pie itself had an incomparably stinky smell. Together with the canned herring, the smell was like the wave stacking force, becoming more and more horrible. Master Xinjiang's beard was trembling. In the distance, many onlookers could not help but cover their mouths and turn their heads away when they saw this scene. In the alchemy workshop, all kinds of furnace explosions rang out. They were caused by the stench. This stench, it almost enveloped half of District. It was like a nightmare. Gulp. A drop of sweat slid down Master Xinjiang's forehead. As the sweat kept rolling down, it gradually dripped onto his neck and slid all the way to the bottom. The next moment, Master Xinjiang shoved the food into his mouth. Boom! At that moment, Master Xinjiang felt a stench burst out of his mouth and penetrated his whole body. At that moment, his tears flowed uncontrollably. He choked. The stench filled his nostrils and enveloped his sense of taste, making it difficult for him to breathe. He wanted to taste it. However, as his tongue moved, the smell was unimaginable, but the stench made his stomach churn uncontrollably. Master Xinjiang's eyes widened as he fought back tears. He refused to let the tears fall. How could he give in just like that after boasting earlier? How could he be conquered by a dish like this? Slurp, slurp. Master Xinjiang began to chew. The sticky juice also had a strong taste. In fact, the texture was actually very good. Although there was no fragrance, the impact on the taste buds was not as severe as the sense of smell. In fact, it was delicious. However, Master Xinjiang's mind was blank at this moment. All that was left in him was despair because of the stench. When the surrounding nobles saw that Master Xinjiang actually took a bite of this thing, it was simply shocking. He was indeed a master. He could even withstand this dark cuisine. It should be noted that many people retreated in defeat just by smelling the stench. But Master Xinjiang actually ate it. King really ate it. Bufang was also slightly surprised. He did not expect that Master Xinjiang would really take a bite of the stargazy pie. Master Xinjiang exhaled. It was only a mouthful, but his entire body was drenched in sweat. The taste was actually very good. Compared to the stench, it was like heaven and earth. However, it was unacceptable to bear that stench. Master Xinjiang swore that he would never take a second bite. The smell, it was like the torture of hell. Come on. Since you've taken the first bite, you can take the second one. Look, there are only a few bites left in your share. Also, eat this fish head. Look at its bright eyes. It's looking forward to being tasted by you. At some point, Bufong had come to Master Jinyang's side and egged him on. The rule of the challenge was not to take a bite, but to finish one's canned herring stargazy pie. Although Master Jinyang had only taken a small bite, it was a milestone in his progress. What? There's still so much left. Master Jinyang's eyes widened. He glanced at Bufong, his beard trembling. Now he looked at the stargazy pie, the flowing juice, and the focused herring eyes. Most importantly, the stench seemed to be getting worse, which made him completely unable to control the sadness and despair in his heart. Blurk. Then he looked at the small piece of stargazy pie on the blue and white porcelain plate. Master Jinyang spat it out. It was fine if he didn't eat it, but after he took a bite, he turned around and smelled the stench, the chemical effect. It made Master Jinyang feel as if he had taken a roller coaster ride with a full stomach. In that instant, he felt as if he was floating in the air. He watched as Master Jinyang fell straight to the ground. Bufong was disappointed. Wiped out. 10 challengers, less than 1 in 10 survived. Alas, although you have failed, you will always be warriors, Bufong said. His voice was not loud. However, the faces of the surrounding nobles darkened. Wiped out. 10 challengers, many of whom were saints of the Great Path, were wiped out by a dark dish. This was a disgrace. No one had expected that no one could complete the challenge set by the chef. However, how could anyone eat such a stench? It was unfair. The chef must have expected this outcome. Viscount Ash sobbed in the distance. When she saw that even Master Jinyang had been defeated, she immediately felt much better. She felt much better. Even Master Jinyang, who lived in the stench of exploding furnaces all year round, was defeated by the stargazy pie. Her sobbing was not shameful. However, she was still very dissatisfied. You must be deliberately making things difficult for us. No one can complete this challenge with such a stench and dark dish. Viscount Ash said. As soon as she said that, many nobles around her nodded in agreement. They felt that Bufong's challenge was very unreasonable. Although the reward was generous, a wisp of chaotic energy, it was a challenge that no one could complete, so no matter how generous the reward was, it was meaningless. Bufong glanced at Viscount Ash. Can't eat it? Didn't Master Jinyang eat it? He's a real man. Bufong said, but your request is for everyone to finish the whole dish. Viscount Ash did not give up and continued to insist. There is no one who can complete this challenge of yours. Just the stench alone is unbearable. Bufong looked at her expressionlessly. Just because you can't complete it doesn't mean no one can. Bufong glanced at Viscount Ash. He walked to the stargazy pie. With a twist of the dragon bone kitchen knife, he cut off a piece. The stench surged. In fact, the stargazy pie looked like a piece of cheesecake. All the nobles present quieted down. Viscount Ash was also dumbfounded. She stopped yelling and stared at Bufong. Does this chef really want to? Do you think no one can complete this challenge? Bufong said indifferently, looking at Viscount Ash. To tell you the truth, in the world of dark cuisine, this challenge is relatively easy. In the world of dark cuisine, this dish is not the most terrifying. Bufong said. After that, he stuffed the whole stargazy pie in his mouth. He bit down, making a crunching sound. Bufong grabbed the head of the herring and pulled it out. Only the bones were left, and Bufong threw them on the table. The fish was tender, smooth. Coupled with the soft texture of the pastry and the smoothness of the canned juice, the taste buds were stirred. In fact, if one did not consider the stench of this dish, it was really a delicious dish. Even Bufong couldn't help but frown the moment he swallowed the dish. He couldn't help but furrow his brows. The stargazy pie was indeed worthy of being the king of dark cuisine on Earth. However, the meat of the herring was actually very delicious. Those who knew how to enjoy themselves would naturally be able to appreciate the taste. Viscount Ash was dumbfounded. The nobles around her looked terrified. Xiao Ai covered her mouth. You pursed your lips and smiled. The noblewoman was dumbstruck. Her red lips were slightly parted, which made her look somewhat cute. Marquis Langou's pinky finger twitched, showing the shock in his heart. Damn it, he really swallowed it in one gulp. That scared me to death. Marquis Langou's heart skipped a beat. Master Jinyong, who had fainted on the table, woke up. The moment he woke up, he saw Bu Fong swallow the stargazy pie in one gulp. He also saw Bu Fong grab the fish head and pull out a string of fish bones. It was as if an asteroid had hit him in the chest. That was a moment of depression. Then he thought of the scene when he stuffed the stargazy pie into his mouth. His stomach churned again. His eyes rolled back, and he fainted again. Please don't wake me up. This world is too scary. You. Viscount Ash stared blankly at Bu Fong, her heart trembling. That sense of despair, that sense of horror, she really felt it. Isn't it stinky? Bu Fong exhaled deeply and let out a burp. As the god of cooking who wanted to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, what was the big deal about eating a dark cuisine? Dark cuisine was just a small mountain in the vast world of cooking. It was nothing after he had climbed over it. Bu Fong burped, raised his hand, and patted his chest. He couldn't help but frown when he smelled the stench. Even the legendary biochemical weapons are nothing more than this. Who said no one can complete this challenge? Bu Fong said indifferently, glancing at Viscount Ash. Viscount Ash blushed, but she had nothing to say. You won, you F*** king. You really won. I don't want the chaotic energy anymore, okay? Actually, this dish is really good, Bu Fong said. Do you want to try it again? Bu Fong said, looking at Viscount Ash. Viscount Ash quickly shook her head like a rattle. She didn't want to experience that stench a second time. Well, in that case, today's challenge is over. It's a pity that I didn't give away the chaotic energy. It's a pity that I didn't give away the chaotic energy. Bu Fong put away the stargazy pie on the table. The stench disappeared, and many people felt as if they had been reborn. Many people gasped for breath, feeling that the world was so beautiful. But don't worry. In the next few days, I will set up a stall in front of the restaurant, and the challenge will continue as usual. Those who complete the challenge still have a chance to get the chaotic energy. Bu Fong said. Many nobles froze, and then their faces froze. I can't believe this chef will continue to set up challenges. He looks so confident. Does he really have the chaotic energy? Many nobles' hearts began to beat faster. Viscount Ash's eyes lit up. Is tomorrow's challenge still the stargazy pie? She had a good plan. Today, she was caught off guard by the stench, but when she went back and calmed down, perhaps she would be able to withstand a next challenge. For the chaotic energy, what was there to be afraid of? Even if it was the despair stargazy pie, she would give it a try. No, tomorrow's challenge is naturally not the stargazy pie. Bu Fong gave Viscount Ash a strange look. Of course it's another dark cuisine. What? The nobles in the distance were ready to make a move. Viscount Ash and Master Jinyong, who had just woken up, were taken aback. Can you reveal the name of tomorrow's dark cuisine? Viscount Ash asked, her mind racing. Many nobles also looked curiously at Bu Fong. The noblewoman, Yu, and Xiao AI were all very curious. Would Bu Fong bring out a new dark cuisine tomorrow? Where did he get such a strange dark cuisine? Bu Fong did not expect that they would want to know the name of the next dark cuisine. Bu Fong pursed his lips. The look in his eyes deepened. He glanced at the crowd and exhaled. Well, since you all want to know, I'll reluctantly reveal the name of the next dish. Everyone looked curiously at Bu Fong. According to Bu Fong, the stargazy pie was not the top dark cuisine. What other dark cuisine could be darker than this? It was something that could make even saints of the great path faint. For a moment, everyone was staring at Bu Fong, looking forward to the name of the dish. Many people suddenly found that they were somewhat interested in the so-called delicacies. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back and pondered for a moment. Then, he looked up with a deep look in his eyes. The next challenge dish is also the king of dark cuisine. It's called 18 Hell Curry. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.